Hello everyone, I am Alex and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from? What time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. I remember the first night I noticed it. I was lying on the bed in the small cottage, feeling sweat trickle down my arms even though the heater was off. I had rented this place because I needed to be alone. I had signed the divorce papers a week before. I had packed my clothes and some personal items, left the city, and come here. It was close to where my grandparents used to live. Their old property wasn't far down the road. The landlord said the cottage was small but clean. He said the area was quiet. He said nobody would bother me. I wanted that, but I didn't feel alone after the first night. I was in the bedroom, lying on the old mattress, trying to relax. The walls were thin, and there was a large wooden wardrobe in the corner. There was a single lamp on the bedside table throwing weak light around the room. The room smelled stale like dusty fabric and old wood. I could hear the wind outside and an occasional rustling sound near the window. I tried to close my eyes and focus on breathing. I wanted to sleep. I felt tired and drained from all the recent problems with the divorce, the paperwork, and the arguments. I thought a quiet spot like this would give me some peace. I rolled to one side and saw a dark shape near the corner where the wardrobe stood. At first I thought it was just a shadow. The lamp was dim, and the furniture cast all sorts of shapes on the walls. I blinked and looked again. The shape did not move. It had a rough outline that did not match the corner. I sat up and reached for the lamp. My hand shook a bit. My heart started to pound. I didn't know why. I told myself it was just my imagination. I tried to ignore it and lay back down. I was able to sleep after a few hours of restless tossing, but I kept feeling like there was someone behind me, breathing quietly, waiting. The next morning, I got up and tried to dismiss it as nothing. I opened the curtains and let some weak sunlight in. The cottage looked normal in daylight. The bedroom was small and had bare walls. The wardrobe was in the same place. There was no weird shape now. I made coffee on the small stove in the main room. I took a shower in the cramped bathroom where the water pressure was low and the pipes rattled a little. I avoided thinking about the night. Instead, I stepped outside and looked around. The property had a few trees and some bushes. The cottage stood alone. I didn't see anyone nearby. The landlord lived a few miles away. The main road was empty. I walked around the cottage and checked the windows. Everything seemed fine. I spent the rest of the day reading a magazine I found in a drawer and heating a can of soup for lunch. It was quiet, but the quiet didn't feel peaceful. It felt heavy. I couldn't stop feeling like I was being watched. I looked over my shoulder a few times, seeing nothing but empty space. That evening, I turned on the lamp in the bedroom and sat on the bed for a long time, just staring at the corner. I wanted to prove to myself there was nothing there. The wardrobe sat in the corner, and a chair stood next to it. Nothing else. No movement. The walls were plain. After a while, I turned off the lamp and tried to sleep. I woke up sweating in the middle of the night. I didn't know what time it was. I felt cold air around my face. I felt a presence at the foot of the bed. I didn't see it clearly. The room was too dark. My eyes adjusted slowly, and I thought I saw a figure sitting there. It didn't move or make a sound. I froze. My heart was pounding hard. I tried to speak, but no words came out. I reached over and turned on the lamp. The light revealed an empty foot of the bed. No one was there. I rubbed my eyes and leaned forward. I saw nothing. The bedding was rumpled, and the room was silent. I stayed awake until morning. My stomach felt tense, and my skin felt damp. I kept imagining someone crouching or sitting at the end of the bed, just watching. I didn't know what to do. I could leave, but I had rented this place for a while, and I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't losing it. I also didn't know where else to go. I had left my old life behind. I wanted a break. This place was supposed to help me clear my head. I decided to set some traps. I placed a chair in front of the door to the bedroom, locked the window, and put my phone on video mode facing the bed. The idea made me feel silly, but I felt desperate to understand what was going on. That night, I sat on the bed fully clothed. I didn't want to lie down. I watched the corners. After a few hours, my eyes grew heavy and I fell asleep. When I woke up, it was still dark. I felt something in the room again. I could hear a soft scratch against the floor. I turned my head and saw a shape at the foot of the bed. It looked like a person sitting there facing me. I couldn't see a face or any features, just a shape darker than the rest of the room, like solid darkness. My throat tightened. I reached for my phone, shaking, turned on its flashlight, and saw that the shape was gone. I jumped out of bed, turned on the main light, and checked the door. It was still blocked by the chair. The window was locked, just as I had left it. I checked the phone's video. All I saw was me sleeping, tossing around, then waking up. I paced around the cottage, furious and confused. I opened closets and looked under the bed, then checked the living room and bathroom. Nothing, no footprints, no dirt, no sign of anyone. My scalp tingled. My arms were tense, and I had goosebumps. I thought maybe I was dreaming all of this. Maybe my stress and recent divorce were messing with my head. I tried to calm myself down. I drank some water. I sat on the couch in the living room, waiting for the sun to come up. I didn't sleep again that night. The next day, I decided to spend less time inside. I went outside and walked down the road. I saw the old property where my grandparents had lived. It was abandoned now. The old house was boarded up, and some of the old sheds and barns were half collapsed. I stood there for a while, noticing the silence. No cars passed by, no voices, just some birds. The air felt damp. I didn't feel comfortable staying outside too long, so I returned to the cottage. I wanted to talk to someone, so I called the landlord. He asked if everything was okay. I said I was fine, just wanted to confirm some details about the place. He said the cottage was old but well-maintained and that nobody had rented it for a while before me. I asked if anyone had complained about strange noises or anything like that. He sounded confused, then asked if I was having trouble sleeping. I said I was fine and hung up. I felt stupid. I didn't want him to think I was insane. I tried to keep myself busy. I heated some canned food and ate it, washed the dishes, wiped the counters, and cleaned the bathroom. I tried not to think about the figure, but when night fell, I started feeling uneasy again. The small lamp in the bedroom seemed weaker. The corners seemed darker. I sat on the bed with all the lights on in the cottage. I kept the hallway light on too. I could hear the old pipe settling. My heart was beating fast, even though I tried to stay calm. After midnight, I got tired and went to the bathroom. I looked at my face in the mirror. I looked pale and tired. I washed my hands. I looked up again. I thought I saw something behind me in the reflection, just a dark shape leaning into the bathroom doorway. I spun around fast, but there was nothing there. I cursed out loud. I hit the sink with my fist. My knuckles hurt. I turned off the bathroom light and walked back to the bedroom. I stood in the doorway for a few minutes, just staring at the bed. I didn't want to go near it. I sat down on the floor, leaning against the wall, facing the bed. I waited. My back hurt against the hard wall. Every time I blinked, I thought I saw a shape moving at the foot of the bed. When I stared directly at it, there was nothing. This continued for hours. Eventually, I dozed off. I woke up to a scraping sound near my feet. I opened my eyes and saw something at the foot of the bed again. I couldn't take it anymore. I jumped up and shouted. I rushed forward and swung my arms through the space, but felt nothing, just empty air. I hit the footboard of the bed with my leg. It hurt. I turned on the main light again. The room looked normal, plain and empty. My heart was pounding so hard that I felt lightheaded. I sat on the bed and tried to steady my breathing. I decided I needed to leave, at least for a few hours. I grabbed my jacket and flashlight and stepped outside. It was late, maybe 3 in the morning. The sky was dark and the trees stood still. I walked around the cottage, shining the flashlight into the bushes and around the back. I saw no signs of anyone. I checked the windows from the outside. Nothing suspicious. I felt stupid. I went back inside, locked the door, and sat in the living room. I turned on the radio I found in a drawer. It was mostly static, but eventually I found a weak music station. I let it play quietly. I stayed in the living room until morning, trying not to close my eyes. I jumped at every small noise. My body felt stiff from tension. When the sun rose, I felt slightly better. I made breakfast, forcing myself to eat toast and drink some instant coffee. I swallowed it even though my stomach felt tight. I tried to think of what to do next. I considered leaving for good or staying at a motel, but I also felt stubborn. This was just a cottage. There was no one here. I spent the next night in the living room. I moved the couch so that it faced the doorway to the bedroom. I left the bedroom door open with the light off inside. I wanted to see if the figure would appear in a different room. I sat there with a flashlight in my hand and my phone on the coffee table, recording video. Hours passed. At some point, I started nodding off. My head jerked forward. When I looked up, I saw a shape standing in the doorway. It looked tall, but I couldn't see details. I felt pain in my chest from the shock. I pointed the flashlight at it. The beam showed an empty doorway. Nothing. I played back the video on my phone. Nothing visible, just me staring at the doorway like an idiot. I felt trapped. I couldn't prove anything. I couldn't catch whoever or whatever this was. I started talking aloud, asking what it wanted, why it was here. I got no answer. I felt my voice shaking. My arms and legs felt weak. I paced around the cottage, turning on every light, opening every door, checking every cabinet. I found nothing unusual. The cottage was so small and bare that there was nowhere to hide. Yet I couldn't stop feeling eyes on me whenever I turned my back. I spent the next day outside again, walking along the empty road. I thought about calling a friend. I realized I had not told anyone where I was staying. I decided I would call a friend later that night and ask if I could crash at his place. I was done with this place. I would lose my deposit, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get away from that feeling. When I got back, the sun was setting. I packed my things and put them by the door. I called my friend, but he didn't pick up. I left a message telling him I was on my way and would call again from the road. I grabbed my keys and walked to my car. I stood there and looked at the cottage. It was small and plain. There was nothing unusual about it in daylight. But I knew what I had seen. I knew what I had felt. I was not going to spend another night there. I got into the car and started the engine. The engine hummed. I turned on the headlights. As I pulled away, I kept my eyes on the road. I did not look back at the cottage. I did not want to see if there was a shape standing in the window or at the door. I just wanted to get away and not think about it anymore. I remember that night because it started with a stupid decision. I had this old beat-up Ouija board, which I'd found at a flea market 2 days earlier. It wasn't even a proper board. It looked like someone took a thin piece of plywood, wrote the letters and numbers with a black marker, and then tried to draw a few basic symbols around the edges. The old man who sold it to me acted like he didn't care about it. I asked him how much he wanted for it, and he shrugged. I got it for almost nothing. I didn't plan on actually using it. I just thought it was weird and might look funny on my wall. But that night, after a long day trying to figure out how to stretch my last few bucks until my next paycheck, I had nothing better to do. The TV reception was terrible. My phone battery was low, and I was bored. I took out the makeshift Ouija board, placed it on my coffee table, and tried to play around with it. I sat on the old couch, facing the low coffee table in my small living room. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment. The place isn't fancy, the walls need a paint job, the carpet is old, and the furniture came secondhand from people who moved out and left stuff behind. The coffee table is this chipped, dark wooden piece that wobbles if you lean on it too hard. The kitchen is just a few steps away, and the bathroom door is visible from where I sit if I lean forward a bit. I remember placing my fingertips on a small plastic bottle cap that I was using as the planchette. The board itself smelled dusty and old. I asked a few stupid questions aloud. Is there anyone here? And can you hear me? Nothing happened. I moved the bottle cap around, trying to keep it as light under my fingers as possible. At one point, I convinced myself that it moved a bit on its own, but I'm pretty sure I just pushed it without noticing. After 10 minutes of this, I got bored. I said something like, "Okay, I'm done." And I pushed the board aside and turned my attention to my phone. I didn't feel any weird chills. I didn't see any strange lights. Nothing unusual happened right then. I shrugged, put the board on the floor, leaning against the couch, and decided to heat up a can of soup for dinner. About an hour later, I was dozing off on the couch. I never sleep well on that couch, but I must have drifted off. When I opened my eyes, I noticed something odd on the coffee table. There were these faint fingerprint smudges, almost like oily marks, right on the wooden surface. They were not mine. I say that because I had wiped that table clean a few days earlier, and these prints looked small, almost delicate, like someone with narrow fingers had pressed down firmly. I looked at my own hands. They were larger, and I usually leave different kinds of smudges. I ran my hand over them. The table felt normal, a bit dusty in the corners, but the smudges didn't rub off easily. I pressed harder, but they stayed there, faint but visible. I told myself maybe I just never noticed them before. Maybe it was just some pattern in the wood. I got up, went to the kitchen, grabbed a damp rag, and tried to wipe them away. They faded a bit, but I could still see the vague outlines. It annoyed me. I didn't think it was supernatural, I just thought my eyes were playing tricks. I turned off the lights and went to bed. That night, I woke up suddenly after a few hours of sleep. My heart was pounding, and I couldn't say why. I lay there in the dark, listening. The window was closed. The street outside was quiet. Then I heard something faint, like muffled voices in the other room. It sounded like two people whispering. I held my breath and listened. The sound was too low to make out words. It just sounded like low, soft voices, maybe coming from the living room. I don't live with anyone. I don't have a roommate. I don't even have visitors that often. I thought maybe it was the neighbors. Thin walls are common in cheap buildings, but it sounded like it was coming from my living room a few steps away. I got out of bed, my knees feeling a bit shaky, and grabbed my phone. I walked slowly to the bedroom door and pressed my ear against it. The voices were still there, still low, still impossible to understand. I turned the doorknob and stepped into the hallway. The moment I switched on the hall light, the voices stopped. I walked into the living room, checked behind the couch, looked out the window. Nothing. I even looked at the front door to make sure it was locked. I told myself it must be the building's plumbing or some weird echo. I went back to bed, feeling uneasy. It took me a while to fall asleep again. In the morning, I got up and headed to the bathroom to splash water on my face. My eyes felt heavy and my neck was stiff. When I approached the bathroom door, I noticed wet footprints on the carpet. They were small and looked fresh, as if someone with damp feet had walked from the bathroom doorway toward my bed. They led straight to the foot of my bed and stopped there. The footprints looked like they belonged to someone with small feet, but the shape was unclear. It was more like water stains shaped vaguely like footprints. I checked my own feet. They were dry. I touched the carpet where the prints ended near my bed. The dampness was real. I looked into the bathroom. Nothing unusual inside. The tub was dry, the sink was off, and the floor was dry. The toilet was fine. The windows were closed. There was no leak. I had no explanation. I tried to clean the carpet with a towel and some old cleaner. Eventually, the damp spots faded, but my stomach was in knots. I tried to ignore it and got dressed for the day. I had to go to work, and I was already running late. The next few nights were worse. Each night, I'd wake up to those muffled voices in the living room. Sometimes it sounded like one voice, sometimes two, always soft, always impossible to make out. Each morning, I found those small wet footprints leading from the bathroom to my bed. They never appeared anywhere else, just that short path. I started checking the bathroom carefully before going to sleep. Nothing. I even checked under the sink and behind the shower curtain. Nothing was wet, nothing leaks. I tried leaving a towel on the bathroom floor and another by my bed. In the morning, the footprints still appeared, sidestepping my towels as if avoiding them on purpose. I stopped sleeping well. My stomach felt tight all day. I got headaches. I felt jumpy at work. I even considered leaving the apartment for a while, but I don't have much money. My job barely pays enough for rent and groceries. I couldn't afford a hotel. I asked a friend if I could crash at his place, but he had his girlfriend over and acted annoyed by the suggestion. I didn't want to explain the weird details. I just said I had some issues with noise at my place. He said maybe next week. I tried to brush it off. I had no choice but to sleep in my apartment and deal with it. After about a week, the coffee table fingerprints got darker. I hadn't touched that old board since the first night. It still leaned against the couch, gathering dust. One evening, I decided to throw it away. I picked it up and looked at it closely. The letters and numbers looked the same as before. There was no blood, no stains, nothing dramatic. Just a cheap, homemade board. I walked out to the hallway and threw it into the building's dumpster. I came back feeling a bit relieved. That night, I woke up again around 3 in the morning. The voices sounded closer. My heart hammered in my chest. I lay still, listening. It sounded like someone right outside my bedroom door, whispering in a low, breathy tone. I couldn't make out words, it was just noise, like quiet muttering. I reached for my bedside lamp and turned it on. The voices stopped instantly. I got up, my hands shaking, and opened the door. The living room was dark. I turned on the light. My coffee table now had 6 distinct fingerprints on it. darker than before. They looked fresh, like someone pressed their fingertips into a patch of oil or grease and touched the wood. My throat felt dry. I stepped into the bathroom. The floor was dry. I looked at the carpet. Wet footprints again led straight to my bed. I grabbed a paper towel and pressed it against them. They were definitely damp. I followed the footprints back to the bathroom door. No water source there. I lifted the toilet lid, checked the sink. Nothing. I opened the closet door in the hallway and checked my cleaning supplies. Nothing was disturbed. I went back to bed and sat there, wide awake until morning, with the lights on. The next evening, I tried to record the whispers with my phone. I set my phone on the coffee table, hit the record button, and went to bed. I left my bedroom door open. I forced myself to sleep in darkness, hoping to capture whatever these sounds were. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, I woke up to that same low whispering. My heart thumped. I didn't move. I tried to keep my breathing quiet. The whispering went on for at least 30 seconds before I turned on the light. Once again, it stopped immediately. I got up, went to the living room, and checked my phone. It was still on the table, screen off. I played back the recording. Nothing but static and faint background hum. No voices. I cursed under my breath. I checked the table. The fingerprints were now smeared as if whoever made them had dragged their fingers lightly across the surface. I stood in my living room at 3 in the morning, lights on, staring at my silent apartment. I said aloud, "Who's here?" No answer. I looked around, listening for any sound. My fridge hummed quietly. The clock on the wall ticked. Nothing else. I walked to the bathroom and found fresh footprints, damp as always, leading out of the bathroom and stopping where my feet now stood. I felt my scalp tighten and my throat close up. I backed away. My legs felt weak. I got into bed and waited for sunrise. I decided to bring the Ouija board back from the dumpster and destroy it. Maybe it was stupid, but I felt like I had to do something. It took me an hour to find it because the trash had been moved around. I pulled it out, took it behind the building, and tried to break it over my knee. It snapped unevenly. I threw the pieces into a different trash bin. I came back upstairs and checked every corner of my apartment. I sat down on the couch, breathing hard. Everything looked normal. For a moment I thought maybe I was overreacting, but then I saw it, faint new fingerprints on the edge of the coffee table, smaller than mine. My stomach dropped. I hadn't even noticed them when I walked in. That night, the whispers returned, this time coming from near my closet. I turned on the lights, jumped out of bed, and checked the closet. Nothing. I pulled out all my clothes and shoes, checked under them. Nothing. I stood there in my t-shirt and shorts, breathing fast, sweating, feeling the cool air on my face. I looked at the bathroom door. I didn't want to see those footprints again. I forced myself to go look. They were there, damp and fresh, leading straight to my bed. I ran my finger along one of them. My fingertip came back slightly wet, like I had touched a damp towel. I smelled it, just water. No odor. I wiped my finger on my shorts and stepped back. In the following nights, I tried leaving all the lights on, but the voices would still come when I lay down. They were quieter with the lights on, but still there. The footprints never stopped. Every morning, they were present. I tried locking the bathroom door, but I found footprints outside it anyway. I tried putting tape around my bedroom door, hoping to see if someone physically entered. The tape remained intact, but the footprints appeared inside my bedroom, regardless. I don't have an explanation. I don't have a solution. I'm just a guy with a cheap apartment and barely enough money to get by. I have no idea who or what is leaving these prints, or whispering at night. I don't see anyone. I don't feel anyone touch me. But I see the evidence every morning, and I hear those voices almost every night. My hands shake when I talk about it. I feel a constant ache in my chest from all the tension. I don't know if I'm losing my mind or if something got into my home when I messed with that board. All I know is that I live alone, and yet someone else's wet footprints lead from my bathroom to my bed every night, and there are fingerprints on my coffee table that I can't explain. I haven't found a way to make it stop, and I'm not sure what else to do. I just wait, every night listening to those faint voices, knowing that by morning I'll find those strange footprints again. I hate it, but I'm stuck here. I'm tired, I'm broke. I'm scared, but there's nowhere else for me to go. I remember the day I moved into that old apartment. I had just gotten the keys from the landlord, the man who never smiled and spoke in short, gruff sentences. The place was small and smelled like dust. The floors creaked under my shoes, and the walls had thin cracks near the corners. The bathroom tiles were stained, and the kitchen cabinets had old handles that felt loose. The living room windows were stuck and wouldn't open easily. I didn't mind these problems. I wanted a cheap rental, and I got it. I carried my boxes inside and placed them along the living room walls. I planned to unpack everything the next day. I found the porcelain doll after I tried to push an old wardrobe tight against the bedroom wall. The wardrobe was made of dark wood. It looked heavy, but was actually empty and easy to move. When I shoved it to the side, I spotted something behind it, a small porcelain doll with a pale, cracked face, blue eyes, and messy curls of hair glued on top. It wore a dirty white dress with tiny flowers printed on it. The doll had been wedged between the wardrobe and the wall. It was dusty, and its eyes looked stiff and cold. I didn't think much of it. I wiped it with a damp cloth and placed it on a shelf in the living room, near some books I had stacked there. I didn't have any special reason to keep it, but I didn't want to toss it into the trash right away. It seemed old, and maybe I could sell it at a flea market someday. I left it there and forgot about it while I went out to buy groceries and cleaning supplies. That night, I couldn't sleep well. The air felt heavier than usual. I kept waking up and checking the time. The bedroom was quiet, except for the occasional sound of pipes behind the walls. Nothing strange happened. The next morning I noticed the doll's head seemed to be turned slightly to the side, not facing forward like I remembered. I thought maybe I had placed it that way without noticing, or maybe I had bumped the shelf. I shrugged and left it alone. I spent the day scrubbing the floors, cleaning the bathroom, and trying to fix a couple of loose screws in the kitchen cabinets. When I looked at the doll again in the afternoon, I swore its left arm was raised a bit higher than before. I felt a small chill at the base of my neck. I told myself that I was imagining it. Over the next few days, I noticed small changes in the doll's position every time I looked at it. Once its head tilted more to the right, another time its legs seemed closer together. I checked the shelf. It wasn't tilted or unstable. I stood there for a few minutes watching the doll closely. It didn't move while I watched. I went to the bathroom and came back, and I was sure its position was not the same. I couldn't figure out how this was happening. I felt my chest tighten when I looked at those painted blue eyes. It felt like they were looking straight at me. I ran my hand over my arms. They were covered in goosebumps. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't. The doll's constant shifts made me uncomfortable. I decided to put it inside the bedroom closet. I grabbed it off the shelf. Its porcelain surface felt cold. Its hair felt stiff. I placed it in the back of the closet behind some old blankets. I closed the closet door and locked it with a small key that came with the apartment. I wanted to forget about it. That night, I heard a loud bang in the hallway. I jumped out of bed and turned on the lights. The hallway door was open. I was sure I had closed it. I checked the living room. Nothing looked out of place. I went into the kitchen and saw that some plates on the countertop had shifted to the edge. I found one on the floor, unbroken but certainly moved from where I had left it. I felt sweat on my forehead. I walked to the closet in the bedroom and checked the lock. It was still locked. The doll was inside. I couldn't explain what happened in the kitchen. Over the next few days, more strange things happened. Doors slammed when there was no draft. I made sure all windows were closed. I turned on the TV and it switched channels by itself. The remote was on the table, untouched. At night, I heard tapping sounds in the walls. Sometimes I felt something brush against my shoulder, but nothing was there. Every time I heard or saw something strange, I thought about the doll in the closet. I tried to prove to myself that it was just my imagination, but I couldn't find any explanations. I'd open the closet a crack and shine a flashlight in there. The doll would be sitting right where I had placed it, staring at the back of the closet. Its body remained stiff, but every time I looked into its face, I felt a tightness in my stomach. My breathing would become shallow, and I felt like I was not alone. I tried to ignore these events. I needed to live there. Moving again would be expensive. I thought maybe I was just stressed and tired. I cleaned the apartment thoroughly again, checking for rodents, insects, or faulty wiring that might cause weird sounds. I found nothing. At night, I slept with the bedroom door closed, placing a heavy chair against it. Still, I'd wake up and find the chair moved an inch or two. I started sleeping with a small kitchen knife under my pillow. I never saw anyone in the apartment, but I felt that something was always near me. My heart would pound faster whenever I passed the closet. After a week, I decided to remove the doll from the closet and place it back on the shelf. I thought maybe locking it away was causing more tension. I told myself it was nonsense, but I felt better knowing I wasn't keeping it hidden. I opened the closet door and grabbed it quickly. I held it in my hand and examined it under the lights. Its face was chipped near the chin. Its painted eyes looked cheap and rough. The dress collar was torn. I placed it back on the shelf, facing the living room. I walked backwards several steps, keeping my eyes on it, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. I left it there and went to make coffee. An hour later, I noticed the doll's head turned halfway around, facing the wall. I looked for strings or hinges, anything that could cause movement. I found nothing unusual. I pushed it back to face the room. I said out loud, "Stop that." My own voice sounded shaky and weak. The doll remained still. I walked away and tried to busy myself by checking my phone. A short time later, I looked up, and the doll's right hand was raised as if reaching out. I froze. I felt my heart thumping hard. I gritted my teeth and swallowed. My throat felt dry. I grabbed the doll and stuffed it into the top kitchen cabinet. I slammed the cabinet door and stepped back. Then I heard a door somewhere in the apartment slam shut. I spun around. The bedroom door was now closed. I had left it open. I approached it and turned the handle. It wouldn't budge. Yanked it several times. It finally opened. The bedroom window curtains were swaying, even though the window was closed. I rushed back to the kitchen and looked into the cabinet. The doll was still there, lying on its side. Its head was twisted around at an unnatural angle. I reached for it and felt something like static on my arm. My hair stood on end. I pulled the doll out and dropped it on the counter. I felt weak and dizzy. I decided to call the landlord. I told him about strange noises and problems with the apartment. I didn't mention the doll. He said he didn't know anything about that. He said the place was old and had quirks. I hung up and paced around the living room. I thought about throwing the doll in the trash. I worried that might cause more strange problems. I hated that thought, but I couldn't shake it. I left the doll on the counter for the rest of the day. I watched it from across the room, expecting it to move. It never moved while I looked directly at it. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed, listening for sounds. I heard tapping and faint scraping in the hallway. I felt a rush of cold air on my face, but the windows were closed. My eyes burned from staying open so long. I got up and went to the living room. The doll was on the couch, sitting upright and facing the hallway. I had left it on the kitchen counter. I walked backward toward the kitchen, never taking my eyes off it. My heart pounded. I grabbed a towel from the kitchen and wrapped the doll in it, trying not to touch it directly. I felt a deep unease in my stomach. I carried it to the bathroom and placed it under the sink cabinet. I closed the cabinet door, then I closed the bathroom door. I leaned against the wall and listened. Nothing. I returned to the living room and sat on the floor. I stared at the bathroom door. I thought about leaving the apartment right then. It was the middle of the night, and I had nowhere else to go. I took deep breaths. The air felt heavy. I stood up and walked to the bathroom. I pressed my ear against the door, and I heard a faint scraping sound. I opened the door and knelt down, opening the cabinet. The doll's face was pressed against the inside of the door as if it had moved right up against it. Its eyes looked wide and blank. I slammed the cabinet shut and backed away. I banged the door shut and ran to the living room. I couldn't stay here. I decided to leave the apartment for the night and come back in the morning. I grabbed my keys and my wallet, and at the front door I heard clattering in the kitchen. I turned to see utensils scattered on the floor. I rushed outside and locked the front door. I went down the hallway and out into the street. The night air felt cold on my face. I stayed in a cheap motel nearby. I didn't sleep well, but at least I was out of that place. The next morning, I forced myself to go back. I needed my clothes, my phone charger, and my laptop. The apartment felt stale and quiet when I opened the door. The doll was sitting on the living room shelf, the same shelf where I had placed it the first time. It looked unchanged. I approached it slowly and felt my scalp tingling. I picked it up and felt a slight vibration in my fingertips, like a weak electric shock. I gripped it and marched to the kitchen trash can. I stuffed it in there under old newspapers and scraps of food. Then I slammed the lid shut. Then I took the trash bag out, tied it tightly, and carried it outside to the dumpster behind the building. I tossed it in and watched as the bag landed at the bottom. I stood there for a while expecting something to happen. Nothing did. I went back into the apartment and checked every room. No doors slammed, no plates moved, The kitchen felt still. The hallway felt normal. I tried the lights. They worked fine, and I tried the TV. It stayed on the channel. I chose. The windows opened and closed normally. I unpacked the rest of my boxes. I kept looking over my shoulder, waiting for something to jump out at me. Nothing did. I sat on the couch and stared at the shelf where the doll had been. As I felt the tension in my neck easing, my breathing slowed down. That night, I slept better than I had since I moved in. I locked all the doors and windows. I woke up once or twice, but nothing felt wrong. The next day I checked the dumpster. The trash had been collected. The doll was gone. I never saw it again. I lived in that apartment for a year and nothing else strange happened. Sometimes I felt uneasy when I looked at that shelf. Sometimes I avoided looking at it altogether. But nothing moved, nothing slammed, nothing watched me. And that's all I know. I can't prove any of it. I told one friend about it, and he just laughed. I don't care. I know what I saw, and I know how I felt. There's nothing else to say. I got rid of the doll, and everything went back to normal. That's the story. I stand under the dim streetlight and listen to the buzz of the old bulb. It's late, past 10 Allen. The wind feels dry on my face. I hear distant traffic, maybe a few blocks away, muffled. I'm alone at the bus stop, leaning forward every few seconds to check if the bus is coming. My back hurts a bit from standing in the same position for too long. I shift my weight from one foot to the other. I look across the street to distract myself. The building there is dark, just a long gray wall with a closed garage door and some faded graffiti. There's a narrow sidewalk in front of it, and a tall metal light pole planted into a cracked slab of concrete. That's when I notice him. He's leaning against the pole, arms folded, wearing the dark jacket and dark pants. His face is in shadow, but I can tell he's looking toward me. I wait, expecting him to move forward, maybe to say something or cross the street, but he just stands there. The weird thing is that he never steps into the light. He keeps his face hidden just outside the reach of the yellowish glow of the street lamp across the road. I swallow and look down at my shoes. The night air is getting colder. I look at my phone. The signal is weak, and the bus is late. I lift my head and glance at him again. He hasn't moved. I rub my neck and try to ignore him. A minute passes. 2 minutes. My stomach feels tight. I try to think about something else. I check the time again. The bus should be here soon. There's the sound of a distant engine now, coming closer. I peer down the street and see headlights reflecting on a row of parked cars. Good. It might be mine. As the bus approaches, its headlights sweep over the sidewalk. I see the man more clearly just for a second. He's wearing something like a hood or maybe a cap pulled low. I see the corner of his mouth move. It looks like he's saying something. The bus brakes, and there's a squeak. I think I hear him whisper my name, but it's too faint. The engine of the bus rumbles. I step forward to board and my eyes flick back to him. He doesn't wave or follow. I get on the bus, move to the window seat, and look outside. He's not there anymore. He's gone. The pole is empty and the street is quiet. The ride home is quick. I get off at my usual stop, walk 3 blocks, climb the stairs to my apartment, unlock the door, and lock it behind me. I check the windows. They are closed. I stand in my living room for a few seconds, breathing through my nose. I can still feel something tense inside me, like I drank too much coffee. After a while, I take a quick shower, brush my teeth, and go to bed. I fall asleep thinking I imagined it, that it's nothing important. Next morning, I wake up feeling rested, but still a bit uneasy. I dress in a pair of jeans and a plain shirt. My shoes squeak slightly on the hallway floor as I head to the door. I open it and stop on my doorstep. There's a small piece of paper folded in half. It's about the size of my palm. I pick it up and unfold it. Inside there are strange scribbles, maybe letters, but they're scrambled. I can't read a single word. The handwriting is messy, like someone wrote it in a hurry or with the wrong hand. The paper smells like damp cardboard. I look both ways down the hallway. It's empty. The old lady who lives at the end of the hall is probably out shopping. The building is quiet. I take the paper inside and lock the door. I set the paper on my coffee table and stare at it. I run a finger over the marks. They feel just like normal pen lines, nothing raised. I rub my neck and check the time. I'm going to be late for work if I stay too long. I fold the paper and put it in my pocket. I decide to figure it out later. At work, I keep the note in my desk drawer. Every time I open it, I look at it for a second. Still nonsense. Maybe it's a prank. Maybe someone left it at the wrong door. I feel a little nervous, but I can't explain why. My boss asks me why I'm distracted. I just say I didn't sleep well. I keep my head down and finish my tasks. By the time I clock out, it's already dark. I always work late, and it's normal for me to leave the office around 9 or 10. Outside the office, the street lights are on. I hold my bag tight and start walking to the bus stop, a few blocks away. My legs feel a bit stiff. I keep my eyes moving, checking corners, doorways, parked cars. I don't know why I feel so tense. I reach the bus stop and look around. There are a few people waiting, which makes me feel better. No sign of that man. The bus arrives. I get on. I ride back to my neighborhood. I'm relieved that nothing strange happens. At home, I heat a frozen meal in the microwave, eat it while standing by the sink, and then sit down at the coffee table. I pull out the note and try to understand it again. The marks look like letters, but they're all mixed together. I can't find any pattern. I run my finger along the lines, hoping maybe I can feel something that I can't see. Nothing. Just pen on paper. I check the back of the paper. It's blank. The paper is kind of rough, not like normal printer paper. It might be from some old notebook or maybe a piece of packaging. I decide to throw it away. It's meaningless. Before I do, I think about last night. That man by the pole. Can you leave this here? Why would he know where I live? Maybe he followed the bus. Maybe he followed me home. I feel a tightness in my stomach again. I look at my locked door. Everything is closed. No one can get in unless they break the lock. I'm on the second floor. There's no fire escape outside my window. I place the note back on the table. I decide to keep it for now, just in case. I'm not sure in case of what, but I'd feel uneasy throwing it out. I watch TV for a couple of hours. Some random shows. Nothing interesting. I go to bed around midnight. I sleep well, but I wake up suddenly at about 4 in the morning. I hear a soft tapping sound. Maybe it's just the old pipes. The building is old and makes noises. I listen for a minute. The tapping stops. I go back to sleep. The next morning, I check my doorstep again. Nothing. No new notes. I feel a small wave of relief. My day goes as usual. Shower, dress, coffee, head out. The hallway is empty. The stairs creak a bit as I go down. Outside, the air smells like car exhaust and something burnt. I walk to the bus stop. It's morning, so everything feels safer. The bus is on time. I ride it to work without trouble. At work, I keep thinking about the note. I look up some stuff on my phone during my lunch break, but I find nothing useful. It's just a bunch of random scribbles. I consider showing it to a coworker, but I don't want to seem paranoid or strange. By the end of the day, I'm tired and try not to think about it. That night, I get home around the same time as before. I check my doorstep carefully before opening the door. Nothing. I go inside. Everything looks normal. I eat, watch TV, and go to bed. I manage to sleep through the night without waking. The next day, Thursday, I come home at about 10 again. I smell something unusual in the hallway, like stale sweat. I look around, but I don't see anyone. I unlock my door and step inside. On my kitchen counter, the note is there where I left it. I feel a chill run down my back. I check the windows. Still locked. The door was locked. No one is inside except me. It's just me being jumpy. I decide to put the note in a drawer in my bedroom. I slide it under some socks, feeling a silly sense of relief after doing that, I think. Out of sight, out of mind. I brush my teeth and get ready for bed. I lie down and stare at the ceiling. I can hear some neighbors' TVs in the distance. Eventually I fall asleep. I don't know how long I sleep. I wake up to a soft scratching sound near my door. It's dark in the room. I turn on my bedside lamp. The clock says it's after 3 a.m. I hold my breath and listen. The scratching is very faint, maybe on the outside of my apartment door. My heart thumps hard. I slip out of bed and walk slowly to the door, barefoot. I look through the peephole. The hallway light is on, but I see no one. I wait there for a minute. The scratching stops. I feel both stupid and scared at the same time. I lean back against the wall. It might be an animal in the hallway. Maybe a rat. The building isn't the nicest. I go back to bed. I toss and turn for a while before falling asleep again. In the morning, I check the hallway thoroughly before leaving. No marks on the door, no sign of anything. I shrug it off and go to work. Work is the same routine. At lunch, I check social media. I consider posting something vague about creepy stuff happening, but I don't. I just scroll through meaningless updates. I consider going to a bar after work, maybe seeing if a friend is free, but I'm too tired. I just want to go home, eat, watch TV, and sleep. I'm not even sure if what's happening is real or just my nerves playing tricks on me. On Friday night, I reach my apartment building around 9. I open the main door and step into the hallway. The air feels colder than usual. As I climb the stairs, I think I hear someone's footsteps behind me. I stop and listen. Nothing. Just the low hum of a distant ventilation fan. I continue up. When I reach my floor, I look around carefully. Empty. I walk to my apartment door, unlock it, and go inside. Once inside, I close and lock the door quickly. I stand there listening. The building is quiet. My refrigerator hums and my bathroom faucet drips once or twice. I turn on the TV for background noise. I open my bedroom drawer and check if the note is still there. It is. I close the drawer again and sit on my bed. I feel a small knot in my stomach. I decide I've had enough of this tomorrow. I'll wake up early and try to find out who left the note. I can ask my neighbors if they saw anything. Before sleeping, I place a small chair against the door. It's flimsy, but it makes me feel better. Around midnight, I turn off the lights and lie in the darkness, listening to my own breathing. I wake up suddenly in the middle of the night, maybe around 2 or 3. I don't know why. I listen, there's a faint clicking noise coming from the hallway. It sounds like someone tapping a pen on a wall. I get up slowly and stand by the door. The sound continues for a few seconds, then stops. I don't dare look through the peephole this time. I just stand there waiting. After a minute of silence, I move back to bed. My heart is racing. I swallow and wipe sweat from my forehead. In the morning, I open the door and look around. The hallway is empty. I knock on my neighbor's door. The old lady. No answer. Probably out again. I knock on the door of another apartment. A guy in a tank top answers. He looks half asleep. I ask him if he's seen anyone strange leaving notes. He stares at me like I'm crazy and shakes his head before closing the door. I try another neighbor with the same results. No one knows anything. I walk outside and check the street. It's Saturday, so I'm not working. I look at the sidewalk, the pole across the street, everything. There's nothing unusual. I walk around the block once, hands in my jacket pockets. I see people going into a convenience store, a couple waiting at a bus stop, a few cars passing by. It's all normal. My stomach still feels tense, but I have to assume maybe it was just a random prank. I spend the afternoon in my apartment doing chores. I vacuum the floor, wash some dishes, and open the windows for a while to let fresh air in. By evening, I feel calmer. I order takeout and eat it at my coffee table. I watch a movie on TV. Around 10, I step out into the hallway to throw the trash in the chute. I glance around carefully, nothing strange. I return to my apartment, lock the door, and get ready for bed. Around midnight, I'm lying on my bed with my eyes half closed. When I hear a light scraping sound, I sit up and listen hard. It's coming from my window. I stand up and walk slowly to the window. I pull the curtain aside and look outside. The street is dimly lit, and the building next to mine is about 4 feet away, just a narrow alley. Nothing there. The window is locked from the inside. I tap the glass once with my knuckle. The scraping stops. I wait, pressing my ear to the window. There's nothing. I close the curtain and go back to bed. I drift in and out of sleep, feeling tense. Around 2 in the morning, I wake up to a muffled sound like a thud in the hallway. I get up quietly and go to the door. I listen, thinking I hear a faint whisper, maybe my name, just like that first night. My scalp tingles. I hold my breath and look through the peephole. I see a figure in the hallway, just at the edge of the light near the stairs. It's a shape with dark clothes, facing my direction, but standing still. I can't see a face. I feel my pulse pounding in my ears. I stand there for what feels like a minute. The figure doesn't move. I consider opening the door and yelling, but I'm scared. I just stay quiet. After a while, the figure steps backward into the stairwell and disappears from view. I wait another minute, then back away from the door. My legs feel weak. My mouth is dry. I grab my phone. I think about calling the cops. What would I say? Someone stood in my hallway. No laws broken. No threats made. I put the phone down and sit on the floor, leaning against the door, listening. My heart is still racing. After some time, I get up and go to bed, but I keep the bedside lamp on. In the morning, I open the door. Nothing is there. I check the floor for any more notes. No paper. I feel frustrated and tired. I want this to stop. I skip breakfast and decide to go out. I spend most of Sunday at a cafe and then walking around downtown. I eat lunch at a cheap diner. The rest of the afternoon, I just wander, going into a bookstore, checking some clothing stores, keeping my mind off the weird stuff at home. I come back in the early evening. The hallway is quiet. I unlock my door and go inside. The note is still in my drawer, as if waiting for me. I take it out and stare at it again. Maybe these scribbles are a code, or maybe they're meaningless. I run my finger over the marks, trying to see if any letter is clear. They all blend together. I put it back in the drawer. I heat some leftover pizza and eat it slowly, chewing too long, thinking. The TV is on, some news channel talking about traffic. I decide to stay up late and see if something happens again. Midnight passes quietly. Around 1 a.m. I'm still awake. Lights off, sitting in my living room chair. I hear a soft movement in the hallway. I get up silently and go to the door. I don't turn on any lights. I look through the peephole again. The hallway light makes everything look pale. I see the figure again, standing near the stairs. Same dark clothes, leaning slightly forward this time. I can see a face, just a hood or hat. He raises an arm and slowly runs a finger along the wall. I can't hear it, but I imagine a soft scraping. My stomach twists. My hands feel sweaty. I watch as he steps forward and places something on the floor near my door. It's small, maybe another note. He stands there for a second and then turns away and disappears down the stairs. I listen for footsteps going down. I hear a faint scuffing sound. When I'm sure he's gone, I open the door carefully. I pick up the item. It's a folded scrap of paper, just like the first one. I close the door and lock it. I unfold the paper on my coffee table. More scribbles. They look the same as before, same nonsense lines that resemble letters, but mean nothing. I feel my heart pounding. He knows which apartment is mine. He's targeting me for some reason. I don't know him. I don't remember any enemies. I never borrowed money from anyone suspicious, and I don't owe anyone anything. I didn't anger a coworker or neighbor as far as I know. I put the second note next to the first. They look almost identical, maybe the pattern of scribbles changed slightly, but I can't be sure. I rub my eyes. I'm too tired. I hide both notes in a drawer again. I lie down on the bed and keep the lamp on all night. The next morning I decide to call the landlord. I tell him someone might be lurking in the hallways at night. He says he'll check the security cameras. I didn't even know we had cameras. Maybe they're new. He says he'll call me back if he sees anything. That night, I get home a bit earlier, around 8, and stay awake, waiting. No sounds. Around midnight, I get a call from the landlord. He says the camera on my floor stopped working last week. No footage. He promises to fix it soon. I say thanks and hang up. I feel a lump in my throat. I can't prove anything. I check the peephole every hour. Nothing happens. Around 2 in the morning, I finally fall asleep. No noises wake me. In the morning, I open the door. Another note lies there. Same scribbles. I pick it up, close the door, and lock it. I feel a chill on the back of my neck. My hands shake a bit as I set it on the coffee table with the others. 3 notes, all nonsense. He's persistent. I call the police non-emergency line. I tell them someone's leaving strange notes. They say I can file a report. I say okay, maybe I will, but I doubt they'll do much about it. I decide to call a friend. I tell him briefly that someone's bothering me. He says I should change apartments or confront the guy. I don't want to confront him. I don't know what he wants. I spend another day at work, distracted. At night, I return and push a heavy piece of furniture in front of the door, hoping to hear if someone tries to come in. I open the window and look down at the alley. Just some trash bins. Nothing else. The night passes slowly. Around 4 in the morning, I hear the same faint scratching. I jump out of bed, run to the door, and listen intently. Silence now. I wait a minute, then look through the peephole. Empty hallway. I open the door a crack. There's another note on the floor. I grab it and close the door. Same scribbles. My heart pounds rapidly. I realize he's doing this quietly and regularly. I feel sick to my stomach. I taste something bitter in my mouth. I pace around the apartment, rubbing my hands together nervously. I consider shouting into the hallway, threatening him, but I don't know what he's capable of. No children have died or been harmed, but who knows what he wants. I just know he's targeting me. I consider sleeping during the day and staying up all night. Maybe I could catch him in the act. But then what? After a week of this, I have a stack of useless scribbled notes. I keep them in a shoebox in my closet. Every morning, I find a new one on my doorstep. Every night I hear faint noises. I never see his face or hear his voice clearly. I think about moving out, but my lease still has months left. I talk to the landlord again. He swears he'll fix the cameras soon, but he's slow. The police can't help without evidence. I stop sleeping well. I wake up with a stiff neck and have frequent headaches. I leave the TV on for comfort. I consider setting a trap. Maybe placing something on the floor so I can hear him coming, or leaning something against the door so it falls and makes noise. I try that one night. I place a metal can near the base of the door inside my apartment. If the door even moves, it'll rattle. Around 3 in the morning, I hear a soft click outside. I run to the door. A can is still in place. I check the peephole. He's there, placing another note. I see him stand up straight. He lifts his head slightly and I catch a glimpse of a pale chin. No facial hair, just smooth, light skin. He turns and walks away. I stay up until dawn, staring at that note on the floor. I don't dare open the door to pick it up until morning. At sunrise, I grab it and add it to the box. I'm too tired to think anymore. I realize this might never stop. He's not hurting me, just leaving notes. Maybe he's just playing some kind of sick game. I don't know what he wants. In the following days, the routine continues. Nightly visits, scribbled notes, faint noises. I survive by ignoring it. I stop looking through the peephole. I just wait until morning and pick up the note. After a while, I barely react. My stomach stays tense, but I push through. One morning I open the door and find nothing there. No notes. The hallway is empty. I stare at the floor for a long time. He stopped. I wait another night, staying awake. No noises. Another morning. No note. I feel a weird relief and confusion. Days pass. Nothing happens. The notes remain in the shoebox. I leave them there untouched. After a few weeks of silence, I take the notes out, put them in a plastic bag, and throw them in a dumpster a few blocks away. I return home and lock my door. I stand in the living room, listening. Only the refrigerator hums, and a distant TV from a neighbor's apartment can be heard. My neck still feels stiff, but I feel calmer. I think about the man leaning against the pole, how he never stepped into the light, how I thought he whispered my name. I listen carefully, only silence. I wait a while, then go to bed, leaving the lamp off this time. I remember the first time I opened that plain white envelope. It was about 5 months ago. It showed up on a Thursday afternoon. There was no return address, just my name and the correct number of stamps. Inside was a black and white photograph of an empty bedroom. No furniture, no decoration, just 4 walls, a wooden floor, and a window with the blinds down. At that time, I just shrugged. Maybe a prank from someone at work. It looked harmless. I threw it away and forgot about it. 2 weeks later, I got another one. Same kind of envelope, same photograph, slightly different angle, still no explanation. I checked the envelope carefully that time. It was closed with regular glue. No handwriting on it other than my address, typed out on a small label. No markings on the back. I kept that second photo on my kitchen counter. I wasn't sure why it bothered me a bit. There was something strange about receiving these photos again and again, but I still didn't feel worried. It was just odd. After the third photograph arrived, I started to feel nervous. Every 15 days, the same routine. I'd be eating lunch or watching TV, and a few hours later I'd go down to check the mail and find that same type of envelope waiting for me. Inside, a slightly different view of the same empty room. Always black and whites, always well focused, always no message. After the 5th or 6th time, I tried to find patterns. I looked at the direction of the window blinds, the shape of the door frame, the floorboards. They always matched the previous photos, except for the camera angle, which would shift a bit. Sometimes the camera seemed a few inches to the left or a bit closer to the window. I started taping them to my living room wall side by side in order of arrival, trying to spot a clue. I couldn't find one. When the last photo came, everything changed. I took it out of the envelope as usual, expecting the same thing. Empty room. Nothing new. But this time in the far corner there was a blurry shape. It looked like a person standing there, facing the wall, or maybe turned at an angle. I couldn't make out the face or clothes, just a human outline, slightly out of focus. My hands tightened around the photo. My heart felt heavier. I tried to breathe slowly, but my throat felt dry. I spread out all the old photos on my coffee table and checked if I'd missed anything before. Had there been a person in any previous shots? I didn't see one. This was the first time. That night, I sat in my armchair looking at the photos until my eyes burned. I kept glancing at the corners under the window near the baseboard, anywhere I might have missed a clue. Nothing. The photos were silent. I touched the edges of the new photograph. Feeling the smooth surface, I could smell the paper. It had a faint chemical odor like developer fluid, suggesting it might have been made in a dark room. That meant someone was probably doing this by hand, not sending prints from a digital lab. I tried to think of anyone I knew who still worked with old photography methods. No one came to mind. I decided to check my mailbox more often. Maybe I could catch whoever was doing this. The next morning, I went outside and stood near the mailbox for a while. My building's mailboxes are in a small, sheltered area near the main entrance. There's a security camera there aimed at the door. I'd never bothered with that camera before, but now I paid attention. It was angled downward, covering the row of mailboxes and a bit of the front hall. I wondered if I could ask the building manager to check the footage from the day the last envelope arrived. But that camera didn't belong to me, and the manager wasn't the friendliest guy. Still, it was worth a try. I went upstairs to my apartment and wrote down the exact dates the envelopes had arrived. They were always on a Thursday, every 2 weeks. The deliveries were consistent. That must mean something. I started feeling uneasy every time I thought about it. My neck muscles tightened, and I could feel a dull ache in my lower back from sitting stiffly for too long. I wanted to know who was behind this. Before the next delivery date, I put a small piece of clear tape on the edge of my mailbox door. I figured if someone opened it, they'd break the tape, and at least I'd know the exact time I could look for them. I stayed home all day that Thursday, checking every hour or so. Morning passed quietly. Around noon, I went down and saw the tape was still intact. No mail yet. I tried to act normal, but my stomach felt tense. My hands were shaky. By late afternoon, I started to feel stupid. Maybe whoever it was wouldn't come this time. Maybe they got bored. I walked back downstairs around 6 p.m. It was getting dark outside. The tape was broken. My pulse sped up. I opened the mailbox, and there it was. The same envelope, same shape, no return address. I looked around quickly. Nobody in the hallway. No sounds except the hum of the building's lights. I ran up to my apartment and tore open the envelope. The new photo showed the room again. The person in the corner was more visible now. They still looked blurry, but I could see some details. They were wearing dark clothes, maybe a jacket. They stood closer to the camera's position, not directly facing it, but more to the side. It seemed like they knew the camera was there. My breathing got faster, and I felt sweat forming on my forehead. I went into my kitchen and leaned against the counter, trying to calm down. I didn't understand why someone would send me these images. The room didn't look familiar. It wasn't mine. I looked at my own bedroom, light-colored walls, a rug, a small bookshelf, a closet door with a mirror. None of that matched the photos. The photographed room looked older, simpler, like a place no one lived in. But then why did the person show up now? I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? Someone sending me strange photos. There's no direct threat, just a room and a blurry figure. They probably wouldn't do much. I decided to talk to the building manager about the camera footage. I left my apartment and found him in the garage, sweeping the floor. I asked if we could review the camera tapes for yesterday evening. He frowned and said that the cameras only store footage for a short time, and that it's not easy to access them. I pressed him a bit, but he seemed irritated. He wanted to know what I was looking for. I said someone might be leaving strange mail for me. He just shrugged. He didn't say no, but he didn't say yes either. He said he would check when he had time. I knew that meant never. The next 2 weeks were long. I woke up every morning feeling a tightness in my chest. My mouth felt dry. Each time I passed the mail area, I felt a small shiver along my arms. My head hurt from thinking about it. I started losing focus at work. My boss asked if everything was okay. I just said I hadn't been sleeping well. On the next delivery day, I tried a different approach. I took the day off from work. I went out early in the morning and parked my car across the street from the building, watching the entrance. I had a thermos of coffee and some sandwiches. I waited inside my car with the window slightly lowered. I stared at everyone who passed. There was a mailman, of course, but I knew the difference between official mail and these mysterious envelopes. The official mail always came earlier, and my strange letters only appeared later in the day. Hours passed, and I saw nothing suspicious. The afternoon sun was hot. I felt sweat rolling down my back. Around 5 p.m., I saw a figure approach my building's entrance. This person wore a dark hoodie, hood up, head down, moving quickly. They didn't go inside. They lingered near the mailboxes, just outside the main door, out of view from anyone inside. I squinted and leaned forward. The figure reached into a pocket, pulled out a white envelope, and slipped it through the mailbox slot. Then they left immediately, walking fast down the sidewalk. I jumped out of my car and followed at a distance. I tried to stay calm, but my heart was racing. My legs felt tense. I kept about half a block behind them. They turned a corner and I hurried, trying not to lose sight. But by the time I reached the corner, the street was empty. No one was there. My legs felt weak. I walked back slowly, my pulse still high. I was angry at myself for letting them slip away. I returned to my building and went straight to the mailbox. There it was, the envelope. I opened it in the lobby, wanting to see right away. The new photo showed the room again. The person was now in the center of the frame, facing the camera. Their face was still blurred, like the camera was out of focus, or they were moving slightly. I could see that they were holding something in their hand. I held the photo close to my face. It looked like they had a piece of paper in their right hand. I pressed my tongue against the inside of my cheek, trying to think. My stomach felt like it was twisting. I didn't know who this was or why they kept sending these images. My legs felt tired. I walked upstairs, went into my place, and locked the door. I spread all the photos on my coffee table. I organized them by date again. I tried to spot differences in the environments. I noticed that in the later photos, the blinds were open a little more. The floor in the last photo looked slightly dirtier. There was now a visible crack in the wall near the window, something I hadn't seen before. I wondered if this room was changing over time or if the photographer was altering it. I touched the crack with my fingertip on the photo's surface, as if that would tell me anything. It didn't. I wanted to find that room. If I could find it, maybe I could figure out who was doing this. I spent the next day driving around some older neighborhoods of the city, looking at windows and buildings that matched the style in the photographs. I wasted hours and got nothing. When I got home, I took another look at the photos. The window had a certain shape. The doorknob in one shot was visible. It was an old-fashioned doorknob, round and made of dark metal. Maybe it was an old house, maybe an abandoned one. I remembered seeing a few old buildings near the industrial area. The next weekend, I went there. I parked and walked on foot, checking abandoned houses through dusty windows. My throat felt dry from the dust in the air. My shoes crunched on broken pieces of glass on the sidewalks. After searching for a long time, I found a small, empty house with wooden floors and a single bedroom that looked similar to the photos. The walls were plain. The window frame looked very close to what I'd seen, but the blinds inside were broken, hanging at an angle, not neat like in the photos. Still, it felt close. I went inside through a broken door. The room smelled like mold. Dust covered the floor. No camera equipment. No sign that anyone had been there recently. My shoes left footprints on the dusty floorboards. I listened for sounds. Nothing but distant traffic. I checked the corners, feeling my heart beat in my ears. I took pictures with my phone and compared them to the photographs I'd received. The dimensions matched, but some details were off. In the mailed photos, the blinds were intact, the walls cleaner. Maybe those photos weren't taken recently. Maybe they were old. I didn't know. When the next envelope arrived, I was too tired to be surprised. I just felt a knot in my stomach. I opened it at my kitchen table. The figure was now standing closer to the camera, face still blurred. I noticed something else, a faint reflection on the window as if there was another person behind the camera, but I couldn't be sure. The person in the photo raised their hands slightly, as if waving or signaling something. I rubbed my eyes. I felt my jaw clench. I didn't know what to do. I decided to install a camera in my hallway. I placed a small camera facing my apartment door. I wanted to see if anyone tampered with my door. A few days passed without anything unusual. Then one morning, I found an envelope on my door's welcome mat inside the building. That never happened before. They had always arrived through the mailbox downstairs. Now this one was right at my door. My hands trembled. I unlocked my door, went inside and opened it. The photo showed the same room, the person standing still facing the camera. The blinds were now half open. A faint light came in from the window. I could see part of the person's hand more clearly. They wore a glove. My stomach tightened and I felt a dull pain in my right temple. I checked my hallway camera footage. Nothing, just a slight flicker at some point in the night. No person. No shadow. It didn't make sense. I decided to sleep in the living room that night, keeping the lights on. Every small noise outside made me flinch. I couldn't relax. My breathing stayed shallow. I kept my phone in my hand, ready to call someone if I heard steps. I didn't sleep much. Over the next weeks, more envelopes arrived. Sometimes in the mailbox, sometimes at my door. The person in the photos seemed to get closer each time. The room never changed color or style, always black and white. The figure's face, always blurred. My hands started shaking when I touched these envelopes. My shoulders felt stiff all the time. I paced my apartment and drank too much coffee. I stared at the walls. I checked the locks on my door and windows multiple times a day. When I did go out, I felt like someone was watching me. I looked over my shoulder on the sidewalk. I looked behind parked cars. Nothing. I tried ignoring the envelopes. I stopped opening them right away. I let them pile up on my kitchen counter face down. But leaving them sealed didn't stop the tension. I'd feel their presence whenever I walked past the counter. I ended up opening them anyway, just to know what was inside. The last one I opened showed the figure very close to the camera, almost filling the frame. I still couldn't see the face. It looked as if they were leaning forward, about to step out of the photograph. My heart pounded and I tossed the photo onto the floor. I stood there staring at it, breathing hard, sweat on my palms. I picked it up again, put it back in the envelope, and shoved it into a drawer. Now each time I approach my mailbox, I feel a chill on the back of my neck. My scalp tingles, and my legs feel weak. I've tried ignoring it, but I can't. Every 15 days, another envelope shows up. Another photo of that empty room, which isn't empty anymore. Another figure that's always unclear, always close, always silent. I don't know who's doing this or why. I just know that every time I go down those steps and walk toward that mailbox, I feel my heart beating faster. My breath turns shallow. I pause before opening the mailbox door. I stand there feeling my knees tighten. I open it anyway because what else can I do? Then I take the envelope, hold it in my hand, and feel the paper's texture. And I know that inside there's another photo waiting. Another piece of whatever this is. I haven't found a way to stop it, and I know that in 2 weeks I'll be right there again, standing in front of my mailbox, feeling that same uneasy tension, waiting for the next envelope. I moved into this old house a few weeks ago. I'm not talking about some grand mansion. It's a basic old house built decades ago, with worn floors and walls that look like they've seen better days. The living room has a single couch, a small TV, a coffee table, and a standing lamp right beside the couch. It's an old lamp I got from my mother's place after she passed away. She liked that lamp, said it made the room feel warmer. I kept it for sentimental reasons. I didn't think much of it at first. It was just a piece of old furniture that reminded me of family. Now, every time I sit down on that couch at night, the lamp flickers. Sometimes it goes bright, sometimes it dims, and sometimes it switches off by itself. Whenever it does that, I swear I see something in the hallway mirror. I sit there usually after dinner with the TV on low volume. I keep the lights dim. I don't need bright lights at night. The lamp is enough. One night I was sitting there just staring at the TV screen without really watching anything. Suddenly the lamp flickered off. Not a slow fade, but a quick click. When my eyes adjusted, I looked toward the hallway. At the far end of that hallway, there's a mirror hanging on the wall. In that short moment of darkness, I saw a shape in the mirror. It looked like a person's silhouette standing still. It was just a dark shape, nothing detailed, but it was there. My heart kicked up in my chest. I got off the couch and went to check, but the hallway was empty. Nothing there. When I got back to the living room, the lamp was on again, steady and bright, like nothing had happened. I thought maybe it was just my eyes playing tricks. The next night it happened again. Same situation. I was on the couch. The lamp flickered. I looked toward the hallway and saw that shape again right there in the mirror. No features, no movements. Just a shape standing in the center of the mirror's reflection. I jumped off the couch and rushed over, hoping to catch whoever was there. I found nothing. The hall was quiet. The only thing there was my own reflection when I approached the mirror closely, but no one else. When I returned to the couch, the lamp was stable again. After a few nights of this, I started to feel uneasy. The house is old, and the wiring might be bad. That's what I told myself. It's just flickering lights caused by old wiring. Maybe. Maybe I should call an electrician, but the shape in the mirror bothered me. Couldn't explain it. Why would I see something only when the lamp flickered off? I decided to ignore it for a while. I tried watching TV with more focus, maybe playing some music on my phone trying to keep my mind off the lamp, but ignoring it didn't change anything. Every night around the same time the lamp flickered. The pattern was never the same. Sometimes it just went dim for a moment, and sometimes it clicked off completely. Each time I looked toward the hallway, each time I saw that silhouette in the mirror, always the same spot, always the same height. When I stood up and walked to the hallway, it vanished. I felt a tightness in my chest, a kind of tension that made me feel restless. My palms got sweaty, and my breathing got shallow. I started to dread sitting on that couch at night. Still, I didn't want to move out. I had just gotten here. I own this place now. I should deal with it, whatever it is. I tried to keep calm and find a rational explanation. One evening, I tried something different. I turned on a few other lights in the living room. I turned on an overhead light and a floor lamp near the TV. With more lights, maybe I wouldn't see that strange figure. I sat down and waited. The lamp by the couch still flickered. The overhead light stayed steady, but it didn't help. I still saw the shape in the mirror as soon as the old lamp flickered off. It was like the presence of that figure had nothing to do with how bright or dark the room was, only with that old lamp turning on and off. I got up and inspected the lamp. It's a tall lamp with a simple linen shade. The cord looks worn, the plug too. I followed the cord to the outlet and jiggled it a bit. The lamp flickered when I moved the plug. That seemed like proof of bad wiring. Still, why the mirror thing? I tried plugging it into a different outlet. Same results. Some nights it flickered less, some nights more, but it never stopped completely. And the mirror silhouette always appeared when the lamp flickered. After a week of this, I called an electrician. He came over during the day and checked the outlets. He said the wiring was old and maybe I should update it at some point, but nothing seemed dangerously wrong. I asked about the lamp. He tested it, saying the lamp was old but seemed fine. Just old wiring inside, maybe a loose connection. He replaced the lamp's plug and said that might help. That night, I waited. The lamp flickered again anyway. No improvement. I started to notice other small things. Late at night, when I was half asleep on the couch, I heard faint creaking in the hallway. Old houses have creaks and groans, but this felt too regular. A quiet step, pause. Another step, pause. When I turned my head, the hallway looked empty. I never saw anyone, never heard a door open or close. Still, the noises got to me. I sometimes got goosebumps on my arms for no reason. I tried sitting in different places in the room. Instead of my couch, I sat in a chair closer to the hallway door, thinking maybe the angle would change what I saw in the mirror. When the lamp flickered off, I leaned forward to get a better look. The silhouette was still there, clear as ever in the center of that mirror's reflection. It never moved, it never made a sound, but it was there, as solid as any person. I stood up fast, my breathing heavier, and walked right into the hallway. Gone. Nothing but my reflection in the glass surface. My stomach knotted up. I felt sweat on my forehead. I rubbed my eyes, tried to calm down, told myself maybe it was just a shadow cast by something else, like a coat rack or a piece of furniture behind me. I moved some furniture around. I removed anything that could cast a person-shaped shadow. I took down a coat hanging on a hook. I tried to eliminate every possible cause of a strange reflection, but the shape still appeared. I considered removing the mirror. Maybe the mirror itself was faulty or something. The next morning I unscrewed it from the wall. It was an old mirror with a wooden frame. There was dust behind it. Just a wall. No hidden compartment or anything unusual. I stored the mirror in a spare room and left the hallway wall bare. I figured that if the mirror was gone, the figure couldn't appear. Problem solved. That evening, I sat on the couch, feeling more confident. The lamp flickered anyway. This time I looked toward the hallway out of habit. There was no mirror now, just a blank wall, but I still saw something. It wasn't as clear, but on that bare wall I noticed a faint outline, like a dark shape that shouldn't be there. It was more subtle without the glass, but it was there. I cursed under my breath, got up and checked. The hallway was empty, as always. I felt something in my gut then, a kind of heavy feeling, like I wasn't alone. My mouth went dry. I tried to swallow, but it didn't help. I touched the wall where I thought I saw the shape. The paint was old and cold to the touch. I turned on the hallway light. The shape was gone. I turned it off again. Nothing. It only appeared when the lamp flickered. I brought the mirror back the next morning and hung it slightly lower, thinking maybe changing the angle would help. That night, the lamp flickered and the figure appeared in the mirror again, just as before. No difference. I tried leaving the lamp off completely, pulling its plug from the outlet. I sat there with the overhead light on. Without the lamp, I didn't see anything strange. That gave me some relief, but I didn't like the idea of giving up on using the lamp. I inherited it. It reminded me of my mother. Besides, this was my home now. I didn't want to avoid using something because of a weird shape in a mirror. After a few nights of not using the lamp, I plugged it back in. As soon as I settled onto the couch, the lamp flickered and I saw the figure. I tried to speak to it. I said, "Who's there?" out loud. I felt a bit stupid talking to an empty hallway. There was no answer. The figure didn't move. I got up and walked slowly toward the hallway, keeping my eyes on the mirror. As I moved closer, the lamp flickered more rapidly, as if something was reacting to my movement. My heart hammered. I felt a slight tremble in my hands. When I got close enough to see my own reflection, the figure was gone. I backed away, returned to the couch, and noticed a dull headache forming behind my eyes. I felt tired and tense. I didn't sleep well that night. I woke up twice thinking I heard soft steps in the hallway, but when I checked, nothing was there. The next day I tried another approach. I placed a small camera on a shelf facing the hallway mirror. I wanted to record what happened when the lamp flickered. If I could catch something on video, maybe I could understand what was going on. That evening I sat down as usual. The lamp flickered. I saw the figure. My pulse raced. After a few minutes I got up and checked the camera. The footage showed the hallway. The lamplight flickered on and off on camera too, but there was no figure in the video. On the recording, the mirror just reflected the empty hallway. I cursed. My eyes were seeing something that the camera did not. I tried moving the camera to a different angle, tried a different type of lighting. I never caught anything on camera. The camera always showed the hallway as empty. It made me feel crazy. I knew what I saw though. I could see it with my own eyes, but the camera proved nothing unusual was actually there. After another sleepless night, I tried changing the lamp bulb. Maybe the bulb was causing the flicker and messing with my vision somehow. I replaced it with a fresh bulb. That night, the lamp still flickered. The figure still appeared. I tried using a flashlight instead of the lamp to see if that would change anything. With the flashlight, I didn't see anything strange, but the moment I turned the lamp back on, it flickered and the figure was back. I started feeling a constant tension in my chest whenever night approached. My shoulders felt stiff. My neck felt sore. I was always on edge, waiting for that flicker of light and that silent figure in the mirror. I didn't know what it wanted. It never did anything but stand there. It didn't come closer. It didn't reach out. It didn't speak. It just stood there like a statue. I tried to ignore it, but ignoring something that appears night after night is tough. The stress built up. I felt dizzy sometimes. I tried deep breaths to calm myself. I tried playing loud music on my phone to distract myself. The flicker still happened, and the silhouette still appeared. I turned up the TV volume. It didn't help. I considered getting rid of the lamp entirely. Maybe I could put it in the garage. If the lamp was gone, maybe everything would stop. I moved the lamp to the garage one morning, and I locked it up out there. That evening, I used only the overhead light in the living room. No flickering happened, and I relaxed. For the first time in days, I felt calm. I watched some TV, got sleepy, and went to bed. I thought I had solved it. The next evening, without the lamp in the room, I sat on the couch. Everything was normal for about an hour. Then the overhead light flickered once, just a brief flicker. I snapped my head toward the hallway. In the mirror, I thought I saw a faint outline like that same shape, weaker now, but still present. I felt a wave of fear wash over me. My heart felt heavy. I stood up and turned the overhead light off and on again. It stopped flickering, but I couldn't relax. Over the next few nights, even without the old lamp, the other lights in the house started flickering occasionally. Each time the figure appeared in the mirror, or sometimes in other reflective surfaces, once in the TV screen's reflection and another time in a framed photo's glass. Always behind me. Always still. Always silent. Every time I turned to face it, nothing was there. I tried covering the mirror with a sheet. That night, when the overhead light flickered, I saw the figure's outline on the sheet, just a shadow. I ripped the sheet down. I tried removing every reflective surface. I took down pictures, turned off the TV, and even covered the windows. With nothing reflective, I still caught the figure as a faint, dark shape on the wall. It didn't need a reflection. It was always in that same spot in the hallway. I dragged the chair into the hallway and sat there in the darkness for a while, waiting to see if I could catch it appear without me being in the living room. I waited an hour, 2 hours, nothing. I got up and returned to the couch. As soon as I relaxed, the overhead light flickered, and I saw the figure back in the hallway. It was as if it only appeared when I was sitting there, facing that direction. I felt trapped. I tried calling a friend to come over for the evening. When my friend was here, everything was normal. We watched a movie, talked, had some snacks. No flickering, no strange shapes. After my friend left, I sat alone. Within minutes, the overhead light flickered. The figure appeared again, so it only happened when I was alone. I tried sleeping in a hotel for a few nights. At the hotel, nothing strange happened. I felt normal. When I came back, as soon as I settled in and relaxed on the couch, the flickering started again. The figure never hurt me. It never touched me. It never chased me, but it was always there, watching, waiting. I thought about selling the house, but that felt stupid. There's nothing physically threatening me here. It's just a strange phenomenon I can't explain. No one else would believe me anyway. I tried rational things. I called the electrician again. He tested the wiring more thoroughly and replaced a few old switches. He said everything should be fine now, but that night it still flickered. The figure still appeared. I tried different times of day during the afternoon. With plenty of sunlight, no flicker at dusk, sometimes a small flicker, sometimes nothing at night, always. I tried staying out late and coming home only at midnight. The moment I sat down, it started again. My body reacted the same way each time. Sweat on my palms, a dry mouth, tightness in my chest, a churning feeling in my stomach. My breathing got shallow and I caught myself shaking my head and muttering under my breath. I tried to remain calm, but my body wouldn't listen. It felt like I was stuck in a loop. I tested a theory. I stood right in front of the mirror and waited for the flicker. When it happened, I looked at the mirror closely. I saw my reflection, and behind me, that dark figure. I turned around fast, but nothing was there. It was as if my eyes and brain were splitting reality in two, the real hallway with nothing in it, and the reflected or perceived hallway with something there. I felt a strange nausea hit me, and I had to sit down on the floor for a moment. I tried ignoring it for a few nights. I sat on the couch with the TV on and just refused to look toward the hallway, no matter what. The lamp or the overhead light, if the lamp was gone, flickered, but I kept my eyes glued to the TV screen. I felt the figure there, felt its presence, but I didn't look. After a while, my heart rate calmed down and I could breathe more normally. The figure never approached me. It never spoke. If I didn't look, I didn't see it, but I knew it was there. Over time, I realized maybe I had to accept it. The figure wasn't going away, no matter what I did. It appeared to be linked to the house itself, not just the lamp. The lamp triggered the phenomenon first, but now it happened with other lights too. I could try living my life without giving it attention. Maybe it would fade on its own. I spent the next few days tidying up the house, fixing what I could and trying not to think about the figure. I slept in my bedroom with the door closed. In the bedroom, I never saw it, only in the living room from that couch, looking toward the hallway. The creaking noises at night continued sometimes, but if I stayed in bed, I didn't see anything. If I got up and went to the living room, I'd see the flicker and the figure. I tried to lead a normal routine. I woke up, made coffee, ate breakfast, went to work, came home, ate dinner, watched TV. When it flickered, I just sighed and tried not to look. Sometimes I looked anyway, and I saw it again. The same shape, silent, unmoving. My physical reaction was always immediate. My heart would race, my chest would tighten, and I would grip the couch cushion with tense fingers. I'd get up, check the hallway, find nothing, come back and sit down again. I asked a neighbor about the house's history, hoping for a clue. He said the house had old wiring and always needed maintenance. He didn't mention anything strange. I didn't ask directly about silhouettes or figures. I didn't want him to think I was crazy. Without any good explanation, I'm stuck with this. I don't see a way to stop it. I tried everything logical, but nothing worked, so I deal with it. Some nights are quieter, maybe only one flicker. I pretend not to care. Other nights it flickers many times, and I see that dark shape again and again until I feel exhausted and have to leave the room. At least it's not getting worse. The figure never came closer. It never changed its behavior. It's always the same. Maybe someday I'll find a better electrician who can fix the wiring completely. Maybe I'll get used to this presence. Maybe I'll learn to live with it. For now, I just try to keep my head straight, ignore the flicker, and focus on what's in front of me. If I don't pay too much attention, it's just a strange thing happening in an old house. No one is getting hurt. No one is talking about it outside. It's my private struggle every time I sit on that couch. I brace myself. The light might flicker at any moment. My stomach might tighten. I might see that figure in the hallway mirror. I might feel my chest get heavy and my hands start to sweat. I might stand up, check the hallway, and find nothing. Then I'll sit back down and continue watching TV, pretending nothing is wrong, waiting for the next flicker. It's not perfect, but it's how I'm dealing with it right now. I remember that night clearly. It was around 9:30 and I was still in the office. I had stayed late because I needed to finish a project that was due the next morning. Most people had left a couple of hours earlier. The cleaning staff was already gone. Only a few lights were still on in the hallway. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional click from the old vending machine near the break room. My desk was cluttered with printed reports, a few sticky notes, some empty soda cans, and a half-eaten sandwich I didn't want to touch anymore because it had been sitting out for hours. I was tired. My eyes were dry from staring at the computer screen. My neck was stiff from leaning forward. I wanted to go home, but I had a deadline. I forced myself to finish a few last details before saving my work. Every so often, I would glance at the far end of the hallway where I could see the door to the restroom no one liked to use. It was at the end of the corridor, past a row of storage rooms, in a locked supply closet. People always said that the atmosphere there felt strange. Some said they felt something odd in there. Others just called it creepy. I had never paid much attention to those rumors. I sometimes used that restroom if I had no other option. It was small, with one toilet and a sink. There was a single overhead light and a mirror that always seemed a bit smudged, no matter how many times they cleaned it. Normally, I didn't think about it, but that night, I couldn't help noticing that the light inside that restroom was on. It was unusual because I knew the cleaning crew turned off all lights in rooms that weren't in use. The main hallway lights had motion sensors, but the restroom light had a manual switch inside. I remembered distinctly that earlier that evening, when I had gone to the other restroom near the elevators. The small one down the hall was dark. Now it was on. At first, I tried to ignore it. I finished attaching the last documents to an email and hit send. I shut down my computer and stacked my printed materials in a drawer. I checked my phone, no new messages. It was late. I thought about just leaving, but something about that light bothered me. I wanted to turn it off. I felt a slight pressure in my chest. I tried to shrug it off. Maybe the janitor had flipped it on and forgotten to turn it off. Maybe someone else from accounting or IT had used it and left it on. I wasn't sure, but I didn't want to leave it like that. I stood up and pushed my chair in. My footsteps echoed on the thin carpet as I walked toward the far end of the corridor. I passed empty cubicles behind a couple of closed office doors. The air felt still. The hallway didn't smell like anything in particular, but my nose was dry from the stale air. My shirt felt a bit damp under my arms. I wiped my palms on my pants as I approached the end of the corridor. When I reached the restroom door, I paused. I listened. I could hear the faint buzz of the fluorescent light inside. The door was slightly open, not closed. It always made a slight creak when moved, and I heard a soft sound as the door shifted a bit. I was alone. There was no draft in that hallway. The HVAC system was behind me. The door at the end of the corridor was always locked. I felt a slight tension in my neck. I wanted to just flip the switch and walk away. I reached out my hand and placed it on the door. The surface felt cool. I gave it a gentle push. The door swung open more, revealing enough light to show the white sink, the toilet bowl, and the small mirror above the sink. Nothing looked out of place, yet I felt my stomach tighten. I stepped forward, but before I could reach the switch, I heard something, a whisper, quiet, like someone breathing close to my ear. I froze. I didn't see anyone in front of me. There was no one behind the door. I was sure I was the only one here. I could hear my own heartbeat. My throat felt dry. The whisper sounded like a single word. It wasn't in English. It sounded like volte. I don't speak Portuguese or anything like that, but I recognized the word because I had heard it before. It meant something like go back or return. I swallowed and tried to steady my breathing. There was no one around. The whisper was clear and soft, like a voice coming from behind the mirror or from the corner of the small room. I looked around. The restroom was just a simple place. A toilet, a sink, a mirror, a paper towel dispenser, and a small trash bin. The walls were light gray. The tile floor looked clean enough, just a bit dull from years of use. There was no place for anyone to hide. The ceiling vent was small and covered with a metal grate. I heard no footsteps, no rustling, just that one word. Then silence. I moved back a step. My legs felt tense. My forehead felt warm. I wiped the back of my neck. I told myself I was tired and maybe I had imagined it. Maybe it was just a random sound. But it didn't sound like a random sound. It sounded like a word spoken by a low voice close by. I waited a few seconds. Nothing else happened. The light kept humming. The door stood still. The toilet was silent. I took a slow breath and decided to turn off the light and walk away. I stepped forward again, reached inside, and flicked the switch. The light went off. Now I stood in darkness. Only the hallway light behind me offered some visibility. I didn't want to step into that dark restroom, so I stepped back into the hallway. I turned away from the restroom and took a few steps toward the elevator. My footsteps felt heavier. I just wanted to go home. I reached the elevator button and pressed it. I heard the mechanical hum inside the shaft. I looked back down the corridor. The restroom door was still slightly open. The light was off now, so I could only see darkness inside. Then I saw something that made my chest tighten again. The light inside the restroom turned on again suddenly. It was bright and steady, not flickering. I hadn't heard a switch click, it just turned on by itself. I let go of the elevator button and walked back toward the restroom. My heart rate was faster. I clenched my fists to stop my hands from shaking. When I got close enough, I stopped again. I leaned forward and tried to see inside without crossing the threshold. The restroom looked the same, but now I could hear something else. A soft breathing sound, steady and slow. It sounded like a person inhaling and exhaling, very close by. I didn't see anyone. I swallowed again. My throat felt scratchy. My eyes felt dry. I wanted to leave, but something kept me there. I can't explain why I didn't just run. Maybe I didn't want to leave this unexplained. Maybe I just felt some kind of stubborn curiosity. I stood there staring at the sink and the mirror, listening to that breathing sound. After a few moments, the breathing faded. The restroom fell silent again. I took a step inside. The floor felt solid under my shoes. I touched the switch on the wall with the tip of my finger. It was in the off position, but the light was still on. I frowned and tried flipping it a few times, but nothing changed. The light stayed on, and the switch didn't seem to affect it. My mind raced. Was there some wiring issue? Some kind of malfunction? I looked up at the ceiling fixture, an old fluorescent tube behind a plastic cover. It didn't look special. I reached up to see if I could remove the cover, but it was fixed with screws. I stepped back and checked the wall again. The switch was standard. I pressed my ear against the wall. All I heard was a faint hum. My breathing grew shallow again. I checked my phone's flashlight. It worked fine. I tried shining it around, looking for any hidden sensor or something like that. Nothing. I decided to leave. I didn't care anymore. I would report it to maintenance in the morning. I turned my back and started walking toward the elevator again. As I did, I heard the whisper again. Volte. It was more urgent this time. I stopped and looked over my shoulder. Nothing moved. My legs felt tense. My mouth felt dry. My fingertips tingled. I knew something was off. I didn't believe in ghosts or anything like that, but I couldn't explain this. I stood in the hallway, halfway between the elevator and the restroom door. I wanted to leave. My car was in the parking lot downstairs, and I had my keys and phone. I could get out of the building, but something about that restroom light bothered me more than ever. I felt a strange pressure in my chest, like I shouldn't leave it like that. I didn't know what that meant, but I felt it anyway. I forced myself to walk back to the restroom. I leaned into the doorway and looked at the mirror. My own reflection stared back. Tired eyes, messy hair, a wrinkled shirt, nothing else. The mirror wasn't special. It was just a mirror. I looked at the sink and toilet again. Everything was normal. I listened to the silence. The breathing sound was gone, the whisper gone, but the light stayed on despite the switch being off. I spoke out loud in a quiet voice. Hello? Maybe I wanted to break the silence or see if someone was hiding behind the door or under the sink. I got no answer. I checked under the sink, just pipes and dust. The toilet bowl looked clean, the trash bin empty. I reached up and touched the fixture cover. It felt warm but not hot. I tried the switch again, flipping it rapidly. No effect. A bead of sweat appeared on my forehead. I wiped it away. My heart was still beating hard, but I tried to stay calm. I had to leave. I had no other option. I had tried. The light was on, and I couldn't turn it off. Something had whispered to me, but no one was there. I couldn't explain it, and I didn't want to think about it anymore. I backed out of the restroom and stood in the hallway, staring at the open door. I could see the bright light inside. I took a deep breath and decided to just go. I turned toward the elevator again. This time I would not stop. I pressed the button and waited. The elevator took a few seconds to arrive. I could hear the cables and the soft ding as the doors slid open. I stepped inside the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor. The doors began to close. Just before they shut completely, the hallway light flickered for a brief second. I caught a glimpse of the restroom door in that flicker. I could have sworn I saw a shadow move inside, but the doors closed and I couldn't see anymore. Inside the elevator, I took slow breaths. I could smell my own sweat. My shirt clung to my back. My legs felt shaky. I leaned against the wall and looked at my phone screen. It was late, almost 10. I had to leave this behind. Once I stepped outside, I would be fine. I tried to think about something else, maybe what I would eat at home or how I would sleep as soon as I got there. When the elevator reached the lobby, the doors opened. The lobby was dimly lit, with the security desk empty. The night guard was probably making rounds in the basement or parking area. I took a few steps, and my footsteps echoed on the tiled floor. I could smell the faint scent of cleaning products in the air. I looked around and saw no one. I reached the glass doors leading to the parking lot, my car waiting out there. I could go home, but something stopped me. I couldn't explain it. My hand was on the door handle, ready to push. I stood there holding my breath, my head buzzing with thoughts. What if I left and something worse happened tomorrow? What if that voice wasn't done? I didn't know what I was thinking. It made no sense. I wasn't responsible for weird electrical issues or strange whispers in an empty restroom, but I felt uneasy. It was like leaving a loose end. It was irrational. I tried to ignore it and push the door open, but my hand froze. I felt my heart pounding again, my breathing getting heavier. I turned around and looked at the empty lobby. The security desk phone sat there silent. I could pick it up and call someone, but who would I call at this hour? Maintenance, or my boss. None of that made sense. They would think I was losing it. I tried to calm down, telling myself it was just a faulty light and some trick of my imagination. I pushed the door open and stepped into the cool night air. The parking lot was empty except for a couple of cars. Mine was the dark sedan near the exit gate. I walked toward it, my footsteps on the asphalt sounding hollow. I took out my keys and unlocked the door. When I sat inside, I felt a bit better. I turned the ignition, and the engine started right up. I turned on the headlights and looked around. Nothing unusual outside. I drove out of the parking lot and onto the street. The city was quiet, with only a few streetlights on, illuminating empty sidewalks. A slight breeze rattled some leaves. My grip on the steering wheel was tight, but I tried to loosen it. My shoulders felt stiff from tension. I kept replaying the events in my head. The whisper, the light turning on by itself, the breathing and the switch that wouldn't work. I couldn't make sense of it. I kept telling myself it was just a random electrical glitch, and my tired mind playing tricks. I reached a stop sign and paused, looking at the empty intersection. My eyes felt heavy, and all I wanted to do was get home and rest. I tried to shake off the memory of that whisper. I made a turn and continued driving. After a few minutes, I reached my apartment building, parked, got out, and locked the car. My legs felt weak, but I was safe now. The hallway in my building was quiet, and I climbed the stairs to the third floor, each step feeling heavier than usual. Inside my apartment, I kicked off my shoes, tossed my keys on the kitchen table, and went straight to the bathroom. My bathroom was small, with a single light over the mirror. I flicked a switch, and the light came on normally. I stared at my reflection. I looked pale. There was sweat on my forehead. My hair was messy, and I noticed my shirt collar was damp. I turned the faucet and splashed water on my face. The water was cold, and it helped calm me down a bit. I went to the living room and sat on the couch. The TV remote was on the coffee table. I picked it up but didn't turn on the TV. I just stared at the blank screen, thinking about what had happened. It didn't make sense. Lights don't turn on by themselves with the switch off. I tried to think of a logical explanation. Maybe the building had some wiring issue. Maybe the switch was broken. Or maybe I misheard something else, not a whisper. Maybe I heard a distant noise from the ventilation system. But deep down, I knew what I heard. It was clear. It said, "Volte." I knew the hallway had been silent. I knew I wasn't imagining the breathing. It was too real. I looked at my phone on the table. No messages. No calls. It was late. I decided I would tell someone at the office tomorrow. Maybe someone else had experienced something similar. Maybe the janitor had a story. My stomach growled. I realized I hadn't eaten a proper dinner. I went to the kitchen and opened the fridge. There was a leftover slice of pizza in a box. I took it out and ate it cold, chewing slowly as I still thought about that restroom. The pizza tasted bland and I swallowed, feeling a tightness in my throat. I drank some water. Before going to bed, I took a shower. The warm water helped me relax my muscles. I focused on the feeling of water on my head and shoulders. I tried to clear my mind. After the shower, I dried off and got into bed. I stared at the ceiling. The room was quiet, except for the distant hum of traffic outside. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but each time I drifted off, I heard that whisper in my mind. Eventually, I got a few hours of uneasy sleep. When my alarm rang the next morning, I felt groggy. I got dressed and headed back to the office. The day was bright and people were arriving as usual. I took the elevator up and stepped into my floor. Everything looked normal. The cleaning staff was there emptying trash cans. The corridor was lit by motion sensors. I passed by the dreaded restroom door and glanced inside. The light was off and the door was closed. The sink and toilet looked normal. One of the cleaning staff, a middle-aged man, was wiping a nearby door handle. I asked him casually if he had done something to the restroom lights. He looked at me confused and said he never touched the switches in that area after cleaning. He always left them off. I nodded and pretended it wasn't important. I went to my desk and started my workday. The office filled up with people. Phones rang, keyboards clicked, and conversations happened at a normal volume. I felt better with everyone around. I still thought about last night, but I didn't bring it up to anyone. There was no point. I had no evidence. I decided to ignore it and move on with my tasks. But deep down, I knew what I had seen and heard. I knew it wasn't normal. I still can't explain it. I never experienced anything like that again, but I also never stayed that late again alone. If I had to work late, I made sure to leave before the building got too empty. I avoided that restroom. If I needed a restroom at night, I went to the one near the elevators. I never heard that whisper again, and I never saw that strange light behavior again. Still, I haven't forgotten. I remember it clearly, the silence, the empty hallway, the whisper, and that strange command telling me to go back. I think about it sometimes when I'm alone. It's not a memory I enjoy, but it's something I can't erase. It happened. I was there. I know what I saw and heard. The next time someone mentions feeling something off about that restroom, I just nod and say nothing. It's not my place to explain. I don't want to think about it too much. I just stay away. I first noticed the footprints 3 weeks ago. I was standing near the back door after a short walk in my yard. My yard is small, and the back boundary is lined with thick shrubs that block any view of the next property. There's a gap at one corner where the fence sags a bit, and sometimes the neighbor's cat slips through there. The ground was damp because it had rained all morning, and There were footprints pressed into the soft soil. They were bigger than my own feet. I wear a size 11 shoe. I remember crouching down and touching the edge of one print, pressing my finger into the damp earth, feeling how deep the heel had sunk in. I got a chill at the back of my neck, but I tried not to get too worked up about it. I brushed some leaves over the prints and went back inside. The next afternoon, I walked around the yard again. The sun was still up, and everything looked normal. I didn't see any new footprints. I checked the fences, pulled at the shrubs, and looked for any breaks. There was that one sagging spot, but it didn't look wide enough for a grown man to fit through easily. I didn't find any scraps of clothing or anything that would explain someone passing through. I went inside and made myself a sandwich. As I ate, I kept looking out the kitchen window. I didn't like the idea of someone lurking around back there. The following morning, after some overnight rain, I checked the yard again. More footprints again, large bare footprints. Whoever it was had walked from the left corner to the center of the yard, and then back to the shrubs. There were smudges in the mud under the shrubs that looked like knees or hands pressing down. I touched these marks and felt a slight dip in the soil. Someone had been hiding there, or at least crouching down. I didn't know how to handle this. Just a regular guy. I live alone in this house. I don't have anyone else here with me. I didn't want to call the police and say, hey, there's some barefoot guy walking in my yard, because that sounded weak. They would ask if he tried to break in, and I would have to say no. They would ask if I actually saw him, and I would say no. It felt ridiculous. I decided to ignore it for a couple of days. I didn't see any new footprints for a while. I relaxed a bit. I started to think maybe it was just a drifter passing through. But then about 5 nights ago, I finally saw someone. It was late, maybe around 11 at night. I was in the kitchen washing a dish. I had the lights off in the kitchen because I don't like the glare on the window at night. I prefer to see outside if I hear something. I saw a movement near the shrubs. I leaned forward and squinted. I could see a shape. It was tall, definitely taller than me, but I couldn't see details. The shrubs moved a bit as if someone were parting them with their hands. I heard a noise like leaves scraping. Then I heard a quiet PCU, like someone calling for my attention in a low, soft voice. I froze. My heart was pounding. My mouth felt dry. I didn't respond. I ducked down and moved away from the window. I went to the living room and turned on a lamp, hoping the sudden light might scare him off. I didn't hear anything else. After a few minutes, I crept back to the kitchen window and looked out again. The yard was still. The shrubs were still. I didn't see anyone. I spent the rest of that night checking the locks. I pushed a chair under the doorknob in the kitchen and made sure the windows were shut tight. The next day I felt tired and on edge. I walked around the yard, not to relax, but to inspect everything. I took a small shovel and dug near the shrubs, trying to see how deep the footprints went. The ground was soft. The prints were fresh. I saw a few half prints that led toward the fence. The shape of the feet was long, with toes spread out wide. The person was barefoot. That made me uneasy. Why would someone walk around at night in my yard with no shoes on? That afternoon I started locking my windows before sunset. I closed the curtains so no one could see inside. I had never done that before. I liked the natural light in the evenings. Now I preferred safety over comfort. Around dinner time I heard a faint scraping sound outside near the shrubs. It was still daylight, but the sun was getting low. I hurried to the window and peeked through a gap in the curtain. I didn't see anyone, but the shrubs were moving slightly. I decided to try something. I took a piece of plywood I had in the shed and placed it on the ground near the shrubs. I wanted to see if I could get a clearer footprint on a flat surface. Maybe I could compare the print to my own foot, or something like that. Night came and I turned off most of the lights inside. I sat in the living room with the TV on mute and listened. Around 10 o'clock, I heard a soft thump outside. I stood up slowly and went to the window. It was dark, but I had a small motion sensor light mounted on the back wall of the house. The light flickered on for a second, illuminating the yard briefly. I caught a glimpse of a figure standing near the shrubs. He was big, broad-shouldered, wearing dark clothing or maybe just dirty clothing. His hair looked short, or maybe he was bald. I couldn't tell. He turned his head slightly, and I ducked out of sight. I felt my breathing speed up. My palms were sweaty. I leaned against the wall and tried to calm myself down. I waited a minute and peeked again. He was gone. The next morning, I found a large footprint on the plywood. It was wide and long, bigger than mine by at least 2 inches. I felt shaky holding the plywood in my hands. I didn't know what to do with this evidence. It wasn't exactly evidence of a crime, just that someone had been there. I took the plywood to the garage and propped it against the wall. I didn't have a plan yet. I thought about calling the police anyway. But what would I say that would make them come out? They would probably do a quick walk around and leave. The man would just come back another night. I had to handle this on my own, at least for now. I decided to try talking to him if I saw him again. Maybe he was looking for something. Maybe he was homeless. Maybe he wanted food. I prepared some leftover bread and placed it outside near the fence in plain sight. That evening, I checked and the bread was gone. Could have been an animal though. I didn't feel any calmer. Later that night, I waited by the window again. I kept all the lights off. Around midnight, I saw him. He moved slowly, crouching near the shrubs. He reached out towards the kitchen window, not touching it but holding his hand close to the glass. I got the sense he could see me inside, even though I was sure I was hidden by the darkness. I gripped the back of a chair and tried to steady my breathing. I wanted to say something, but my voice stuck in my throat. Then I heard the PSAU again. It was quiet and short. I didn't answer. I watched him back away and disappear into the shrubs. I couldn't sleep much after that. My mind felt crowded with questions. Why was he here? What did he want? Why the quiet PSIU? It felt like he was trying to get my attention, but he never said anything else. He never tried to break in. He never threatened me. He just hovered outside, barefoot and silent. I started to think he might come back every night now that I had noticed him. Over the next few days, I changed my routine. I didn't go out after dark. I kept my phone nearby, ready to call the police if he tried anything. I checked the yard every morning. I found more footprints, mostly around the shrubs and the fence line. He avoided the center of the yard now, as if he knew I might be watching. I tried leaving more food out, but sometimes he took it, sometimes not. Once I left a bottle of water, and the next morning the bottle was empty and left standing in the same spot, upright. That made me nervous. It meant he was careful enough to leave it standing as if telling me he knew I was watching. One evening, just before sunset, I stepped outside to see if I could catch him during twilight. The air was damp, the grass felt cold under my shoes. I stood near the shrubs and looked through the leaves. I saw the neighboring yard, empty and quiet. I pushed a few branches aside and found a small gap. Someone had pushed some thick sticks aside to create a narrow passage. I tried to peek through, but it was getting dark. I didn't want to call out, I just wanted to see if there was any sign of him on the other side. As I was crouching there, I heard a rustle behind me. I spun around and saw him standing about 10 feet away. He was taller than me, with a heavier build, wearing loose sweatpants and a dark hoodie. I couldn't see his face clearly. He was barefoot, his feet dark with dirt. He looked at me without moving closer. I stood there, my heart pounding, my throat tight. I said, "What do you want?" He just stood there. I tried again. "Why are you here?" He took a step back. I noticed his breathing was slow and steady. He didn't seem scared or nervous. He didn't answer. I took a step forward, and he backed away toward the shrubs. I felt a rush of panic and anger. I said, "Don't come back here," trying to sound firm. He slowly shook his head from side to side, then lifted a finger to his lips, making the Pesio sound again. Then he turned and slipped into the shrubs. I heard the branches rustle, and then he was gone. I stood there feeling stupid and helpless. I didn't like that he had gotten so close without me noticing. I realized I might have to call the police after all, but I knew they might not do much if he wasn't actually breaking the law. Trespassing? Sure, but by the time they arrived, he would be gone. I spent that night with the lights on in the living room, watching TV loudly, hoping to scare him off. I didn't see him that night. The next day, I checked the yard and saw no new footprints. I started to think maybe the confrontation had chased him away. But 2 nights later, I woke up around 1 in the morning to a soft scratching sound at the back window. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding, and listened. The sound came again, a slow, gentle scratch on the glass. I got up and crept into the hallway, staying low. I went to the kitchen and flipped on the light. I heard a quick movement outside, like someone darting away. I went straight to the back door and locked it again, even though it was already locked. I waited for morning, pacing around my living room, checking the windows every so often. At dawn, I went outside and looked at the kitchen window from the outside. There were faint marks on the glass where someone had run a finger or a nail along it. The soil below had a fresh footprint, toes spread wide. The sight made me shiver. I decided to call the police that day, but I waited until afternoon because I wanted to calm down and think clearly. When the police officer arrived, I told him about the footprints and the man outside. I didn't mention the BCIU at first because it sounded strange. I just said the man had been hanging around my yard at night, looking through my window. The officer walked around with me, checked the shrubs, and said he would patrol the area later that night. He advised me to keep everything locked and maybe set up a camera. I thanked him and watched him leave. I didn't feel much better. I went to a hardware store and bought a simple security camera that I could mount near the kitchen window. It wasn't expensive, but it had night vision and a motion sensor. I installed it that afternoon, making sure it was pointed toward the shrubs. I tested it out by walking around the yard a few times. It seemed to work fine. I felt a little more secure, knowing I might catch him on camera if he came back. That night, I stayed up late watching TV, with the sound low. At around midnight, the camera's app on my phone alerted me to motion outside. I muted the TV and looked at the live feed on my phone. The camera's night vision showed shrubs, and I could see him standing there, half hidden. He was facing the house, not moving. He saw his hand come up, and he placed it on one of the branches, pulling it aside. He leaned forward, looking straight at the camera. It felt like he knew exactly where it was. He stood there for a long time, not moving, just breathing slowly. My hands were shaking and I kept as quiet as I could inside. After a few minutes, he stepped back and vanished from the camera's view. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I replayed the footage, trying to see his face, but the night vision made everything look pale and grainy. I couldn't get a good look, just his shape and the outline of his head. I felt frustrated and on edge. I called the police again and said I had footage of an intruder. They said they would send someone to check the area. By the time an officer arrived, it was almost 2 in the morning. The man was long gone. Over the next few nights, I tried different approaches. I left the lights on outside. I played loud music. I even left a note taped to the window telling him to leave me alone. None of this stopped him. Every couple of nights I would get an alert from the camera and I would see him lingering near the shrubs. Sometimes he would be closer, sometimes farther away. Sometimes he would make the PCU sound, sometimes just stand there breathing. He never spoke any other words. He never tried to break in. He just kept showing up. I started feeling run down and jumpy. My stomach felt tight most of the time. My head ached from lack of sleep. I hated going to bed, not knowing if he would appear. I hated waking up at the slightest noise. I got used to checking the camera feed many times a night. Sometimes I would watch him stand there for what felt like ages, just observing. I wondered if he was waiting for something, but I couldn't guess what. One night I grabbed a flashlight and stood by the back door waiting. When I got the camera alert, I swung the door open and aimed the flashlight at the shrubs. I saw him flinch at the light. His face was partly covered by what looked like a scarf or piece of cloth. His eyes caught the light and reflected it back. He put a hand in front of his face and stepped backward. I shouted, "Get out of here!" My voice sounded strained and high. He lowered his hand slightly and made that PCU sound again. Longer this time, like PCU. The hair on my arm stood up. I took a step forward, trying to chase him off, but he moved sideways and slipped behind the shrubs. I heard a crack of a branch, and then silence. I slammed the door and locked it, feeling a rush of adrenaline and anger. I thought about grabbing a baseball bat and going after him, but I was too nervous to follow him into the darkness. I wasn't sure what he was capable of. He didn't seem violent, but he was persistent and strange. I was tired of this game. I wanted him gone. The police came by a few times to check around, but they never caught him. The officer I spoke to suggested I install motion-activated sprinklers or trim the shrubs. He said maybe if I made the yard less comfortable, the man would move on. The next morning, I took clippers and started cutting back the shrubs. I pushed through the branches and found a small clearing on the other side in the neighbor's property where the fence was low and broken. I saw bits of trash there, a plastic cup, a torn piece of fabric, a crumpled packet of crackers. Maybe the man was hiding there. I didn't stay long, I just wanted to remove some of his hiding spots. I trimmed until my arms were sore and the shrubs were less dense. That night, the camera alert didn't come. I waited and listened, but he didn't appear. The next night, still nothing. I started to feel more relaxed. I slept better. I thought maybe I had finally driven him away. 3 nights passed with no sign of him. On the 4th night, I let my guard down a bit. I went to bed at a normal time, around 11. I left the curtains open a crack. Around midnight, I woke up thirsty and went to the kitchen for water. I looked out the window. There he was, closer than ever, right at the edge of the patio, standing in the open where I could see him clearly. He had removed cloth from his face. His skin looked rough and dirty. His mouth was slightly open and his posture was relaxed as if he belonged there. He lifted his hand slowly and tapped lightly on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. My hands shook so much that I almost dropped my water. He tilted his head as if waiting for a response. I couldn't speak. I just stared. He made the same sound again, very soft, barely audible through the glass. Then he took a step back, turned around, and walked away without a hurry. I watched him walk right through the spot where I had trimmed the shrubs, stepping over the broken fence and disappearing into the darkness beyond. I locked all the windows and sat in the living room until morning, not sleeping. When the sun rose, I went outside and checked. His footprints were fresh and deep. There were a few strands of fabric on the fence, and a broken piece of twig where he had passed. I realized I might never know who he was or why he kept coming, and I knew I had to keep locking my windows before sunset and stay alert. He was still out there, and I knew he might come back any time. I moved into the small rental house about a week ago. It sits on a quiet street near the edge of a calm neighborhood. The houses here are simple and well-spaced. I liked the place because it was cheap and looked normal. It has a small living room, a kitchen with old appliances, 1 bedroom with a creaky wooden floor, and an attic that I never planned on entering. I signed a short-term lease to see how I liked living here. Everything seemed fine at first. No weird smells, no odd noises. The owner said no one had lived here for months, but the place looked clean. There were a few scratches on the walls near the doors, and I noticed a slight draft in the hallway. Nothing too strange. It felt like a good deal. On my first night, I heard a few soft pops and creaks in the living room around midnight. I figured it was just old wood settling. I pulled my blanket up over my shoulders and went to sleep. The next morning, everything looked fine. The attic door in the hallway ceiling was closed as I remembered it. The floorboards still squeaked under my feet, but I saw nothing unusual. I started my day, made some coffee, and forgot about it. By the 3rd night, I noticed the noises seemed to come closer. I woke up around 1 in the morning. I was lying in bed, staring at the dark shape of my bedroom door. I could feel the cool air on my face. My ears picked up a steady creaking from the hallway floorboards. It came in a pattern, almost like footsteps moving slowly up and down. I stayed quiet. There was a slight pause, then the sound of gentle breathing just outside my bedroom door. It was low and even, like someone standing there, calm and steady. My heart started to pound. I reached for my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it at the door. I saw nothing through the crack under it. I listened hard, holding my breath. I didn't hear a retreat or any footsteps leaving. I waited several minutes before I finally got out of bed. My legs felt a little shaky. I opened the door quickly and shone the light around. The hallway was empty. I could see the living room light switch at the far end and the closed bathroom door to the left. Everything looked normal. I looked up at the attic door. It was shut. I stared at it for a moment, then shook my head and forced myself to relax. I went back to bed, feeling tense. Eventually, I slept again. In the morning, I walked into the hallway and found the attic door slightly open. Not fully open, just about an inch. The small square panel in the ceiling was shifted, leaving a tiny gap. I felt my stomach drop. I had seen it close the night before. There was no doubt about that. I had not touched it. I grabbed a step ladder from the garage and pushed the attic door closed. It slid back into place with a bit of resistance. I pressed on it firmly and it stayed shut. I tried to tell myself maybe it hadn't been aligned properly or maybe the house settling made it shift, but I felt unsettled. That night, I braced myself. I left a small lamp on in the living room to cast some light through the hallway. My bedroom door was half open so I could see out. I sat awake in bed until after midnight. Around 1 a.m. I heard a soft clicking sound from above. It was a slight scrape, then a muffled knock. After a few minutes I heard the floorboards creak in the hallway again. They made a slow pattern of noise like weight shifting on them. I breathed quietly through my mouth, trying not to make a sound. My chest felt tight. Again, I heard that soft breathing just on the other side of my bedroom door. With the door half open, I should have seen something. I saw nothing, just the dark shape of the walls and the dim lamplight at the far end of the hall. But I could hear it. I stayed as still as I could, clutching my phone. After a while, the breathing stopped. I waited another 10 minutes before getting up. My hands shook slightly. I stepped into the hallway and looked around. Nothing. No one. In the morning, I checked the attic door. It was ajar again by a small gap. I decided to inspect the attic, but I was nervous. I grabbed my flashlight and the stepladder. I pushed the attic door open and climbed up. I poked my head inside. The space was dusty with wooden beams and old insulation. The air smelled stale. I shone the flashlight around. I saw no signs of recent activity, no footprints in the dust, no scattered items, no bedding, no animal droppings. Nothing showed someone had been there. I felt a bit foolish and climbed down. I closed the attic door firmly, made sure it fit tight, and then wedged a small piece of cardboard in the frame to keep it from moving. I stood there for a while, looking up, making sure it stayed shut. It did. That night, I placed a chair in front of my bedroom door and wedged it under the doorknob. I thought that if someone tried to open my door or approach it, maybe I would hear them struggle with it. I turned off all the lights except for the one in the living room. I wanted a bit of visibility, but not too much. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't relax, so I just lay there staring at the ceiling. Around 2 a.m., I heard a creak again, the same slow weight on the floorboards. I held my breath and listened. The sound continued, feeling like someone pacing very quietly. Then I heard that gentle breathing outside my door again. I tightened my grip on the blanket. My eyes watered from not blinking. I reached over and hit the bedroom light switch. The sudden light flooded the room. The breathing stopped. I sat up and listened. Nothing. After a minute, I got out of bed. The chair was still jammed under the knob. I opened the door a crack and looked out. The hallway looked normal. I stepped out. The floor felt cold under my feet. I walked slowly, checking the bathroom, the living room, and then the kitchen. Empty. I checked the front door and the back door. Both were locked. The windows were secure. I looked up at the attic door. I saw that the small piece of cardboard had fallen out, and the attic door was open an inch again. I felt a wave of frustration and panic. Something was messing with me. I tried pushing the attic door closed again, but this time I noticed it didn't sit perfectly. It would close, but any slightest pressure from above or movement made it slip open a tiny bit. I pulled it down to examine it. The attic door was a simple wood panel with a frame around it. The edges were worn. It didn't fit tightly. Maybe it never did. Maybe a draft was causing it. But how to explain the breathing? The next day, I bought a cheap motion sensor alarm from a hardware store. It was a small box that could be placed on a surface. If something moved in front of it, it would emit a loud beep. I placed it in the hallway facing my bedroom door. If someone walked there, the alarm would go off. I also put a piece of tape on the attic door to see if it moved during the night. If it opened, the tape would peel away. That night I lay in bed with the door half open and the alarm set. I tried to stay awake, but I dozed off around midnight. Around 3 a.m., I woke up suddenly. I did not hear the alarm. I looked out through the half-open bedroom door. The hallway looked dim, lit only by a distant streetlight through a window. I listened. Nothing. No creaking. No breathing. I got up and checked everything. The alarm was still set, and the tape was still on the attic door. Everything was exactly as I left it. I felt a brief sense of relief. Maybe it was all just the wind in my imagination. I went back to bed. In the morning, the tape on the attic door was peeled halfway off. The door was slightly open. The alarm was still set, but did not go off. I tested the alarm by moving my hand in front of it. It beeped loudly. That meant whoever or whatever was out there didn't walk in front of it, or it avoided the sensor. I felt my stomach twist. I couldn't explain it. I wanted to call the landlord, but what would I say? Then I heard breathing in the hallway and the attic door opened by itself. I decided to check the attic again, this time more carefully. I climbed up inside the attic during the day with a headlamp and a dust mask. I searched around, moving slowly through the narrow space. I had to crawl on my knees. The air was thick and warm. I looked behind old boards and checked the insulation. I found nothing that showed a person hiding there. I stayed up there for about 30 minutes. There were no unusual odors beyond dust and old wood. There were no tracks, no tools, and no hidden rooms. Just empty space. I came down frustrated. I considered calling the police, but I had no evidence. I considered sleeping somewhere else, but I had paid rent already. I decided I would try another approach. That evening, I blocked the attic door by placing a large plastic storage bin on top of the stepladder and pushing it directly under the attic entrance. If it tried to open, it would knock the bin down. I also spread salt on the hallway floor. If someone walked barefoot, I might see footprints. I knew it sounded strange, but I did not know what else to do. I went to bed feeling tense. Around 1:30 a.m., I woke up to a soft thump. My heart raced. I sat up and listened. A moment later, I heard the breathing again. It was steady and calm, just outside my bedroom door. I felt goosebumps rise on my arms and in the back of my neck. I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight. The hallway was empty again. I looked down at the floor. The salt was disturbed. It looked like a smooth trail, as if something had brushed it aside, not footprints. I checked the bin and the stepladder. They were still in place. The attic door was closed. I felt confused and angry. I demanded, "Who's there?" out loud. My voice sounded shaky. There was no answer. I stood still for a few minutes, just breathing hard. Then I went back to my room and tried to sleep. But I kept the phone in my hand, the light off, and my eyes wide open. I barely slept. In the morning, I saw the attic door open again. The bin was untouched, and the tape was peeled back again. I checked the salt on the floor. It was pushed around as if someone had quietly moved through it. I could see my own footprints, but no other clear prints, just disturbed salts. I decided I'd had enough. I called the landlord. He sounded impatient. He said the house never had problems and that no one ever reported anything like this. He said maybe I was mistaken. I insisted something was going on, maybe an intruder. He said he would come by tomorrow morning. I agreed. That day, I installed a small camera in the hallway. It was a simple indoor camera that recorded to my phone. I placed it high on a shelf, aimed at the attic door and the bedroom door. I tested it. I walked around, making sure it captured my movements. It worked fine. I went out for a few hours just to clear my head. I left the camera recording. When I came back, I replayed the footage. Nothing odd during the day, just me leaving and coming back. That night, I kept the camera on. I went to bed early, feeling drained and stressed. Around 2 a.m., I woke up again. I turned my phone on and checked the camera feed live. It showed the hallway still and quiet. I listened hard. No breathing. No creaks. I watched the screen. A minute passed. Then I saw the attic door move slightly. It was subtle, but I saw the panel shift. I held my breath and stared at the screen. The door slid open about an inch. I saw no hand, no rod, nothing pushing it. Just the door moving on its own. Then I heard the breathing in real life, soft and steady. It sounded so close, as if someone stood right at my door. But on the camera, I saw nothing. The hallway remained empty, just the open attic door. I felt sweat on my forehead. I whispered, "What the hell?" To myself, I tried to stay calm, but my body shook. I got up holding my phone and walked out into the hallway. The breathing stopped. I shone my flashlight around. The attic door was open, that tiny gap. I reached up and tried to pull it shut. It resisted slightly. It felt like something was pressing from above. But when I pushed harder, it closed. I stepped back, breathing fast. Suddenly, I felt a slight pressure on my shoulder, like a hand pressing gently. I spun around and saw nothing. I moved back into my bedroom and slammed the door shut. My heart was pounding. I checked the camera footage from just before. The video showed the attic door moving, but no figure. It showed me entering the hallway and pushing the door closed. Nothing else. No shadow, no shape touching me. Just me reacting to empty air. I did not sleep at all that rest of the night. I sat in bed with the lights on. My body felt stiff and tired. When morning came, I opened the front door to find the landlord on the porch. I let him in and explained everything calmly. I showed him the footage of the attic door moving on its own. He frowned and said maybe the door was loose. Maybe a draft from outside was causing it. He climbed up into the attic and looked around. He found nothing, no sign of animals or a person. He tested the attic door panel and said it was old and warped. He tightened a few screws on the frame, then said there was nothing more he could do. I felt embarrassed and frustrated. He left. I was alone again. I decided to spend one more night there. If it happened again, I would leave early and find another place. I blocked my bedroom door again, set the camera, and sat on the bed waiting. Around midnight, I heard the same breathing, soft, calm, steady. I felt my skin crawl. I checked the camera feed. The attic door stayed shut that time. I whispered, "I know you're there." No response. I could feel my pulse thumping in my temples. I could smell my own sweat. I forced myself to open the bedroom door. I looked out. The hallway was empty. The breathing stopped. Nothing moved. I stood there breathing hard, staring at the attic door. It was closed. The camera showed no movement. I waited about 5 minutes, just standing there. Nothing happened. I went back to bed. In the morning, the attic door was open again, by a small gap. I looked at it for a long time, then packed my bag. I decided to give up and leave. I told the landlord I was moving out early. I didn't explain much. I just wanted to get out. He didn't argue. Before leaving, I stood in the hallway one last time, looking up at that attic door. The house was quiet. The morning light came in through the windows. I felt a heavy, tense pressure in my chest. There was something in that house that I couldn't explain. Something that breathed outside my door at night and opened the attic door every morning. I had no proof of a person, no sign of an animal, nothing. Just the memory of those quiet footsteps and that calm breathing. I grabbed my bag, locked the door behind me, and walked away. I remember the first time I noticed something was off. It was a Tuesday night. I had just gotten home from work and sat down on the couch in my living room. I looked over at the fireplace, where I had placed that porcelain statuette my aunt gave me. She had left for another country and given away most of her belongings. I ended up with a bunch of glassware, some plates, and that small porcelain head of a woman. It had a painted face, and it was always smiling. It had been on my mantle for a few weeks, and I never thought much about it. But that Tuesday night I saw it had turned slightly, as if it were facing me. I remember staring at it, trying to figure out if it was my imagination. It wasn't facing straight ahead anymore. Its chin and eyes seemed angled right at me. I stood up, walked over, and adjusted it back so that it faced the opposite wall. I felt silly. It was just a decorative piece. The next evening I sat down again after work. I had an ache in my legs from standing all day, and I rested my head against the back of the couch. I glanced at the mantel. The statuette was turned toward me again. I got up and stood in front of it, trying to see if maybe the mantel was uneven. I touched the base. It seemed stable. I turned it away again. I said something under my breath, like, "Stay put." I don't know why I said that. I guess I was annoyed. After that, I tried to ignore it. Over the next few days, small things started going wrong in my home. I came back from work one afternoon and found several items in my refrigerator spoiled, even though they were still within their expiration dates. There were dairy products that smelled rotten. There were vegetables that looked fine the previous night, but now had mold. I had to throw everything out. I also noticed a strange, sour smell in the kitchen. It wasn't strong, but it was there when I opened the fridge. I cleaned everything. I scrubbed until my hands felt raw. I threw out all suspect items and bought new food the next morning. Then my car started acting up. The engine made a rattling sound on my way to work. I took it to a garage near my job. The mechanic checked it out and said some parts had worn down faster than normal. It didn't make sense. I had done all the regular maintenance. That same week, a couple of light bulbs in my living room burned out. I replaced them. 2 days later, more bulbs burned out in my hallway. I replaced those too. It was getting expensive. I tried to see if my wiring was off. I looked around with a flashlight, checked the breaker box, and tightened some fixtures. I didn't see anything obvious. At night, I started feeling uncomfortable in my own home. I sat on my couch and looked at that porcelain head on the mantel. It always seemed to face me now. I tried pushing it back again. It was a small piece, no bigger than my hand. The woman's face was painted with delicate lines. She had bright red lips, thin eyebrows, and dark eyes that looked slightly off to one side. The smile was faint, but was there. The paint looked old. The glaze cracked in a few places, and I could see tiny scratches on its surface. The base was simple, just white porcelain. There was nothing mechanical about it, no moving parts. I started talking to it at night. I would say things like, "Enough. Stop looking at me. I felt stupid, but I did it anyway. I think I did it because I was frustrated and had no one else to complain to. I live alone. My aunt was gone, my close friends were busy, and I didn't want to seem like a lunatic. I started noticing that whenever I told it to stop, I would wake up the next day feeling worse. I would find more problems around the house. One morning I found water on the kitchen floor. I thought I had a leak in the sink, but I checked and everything was dry under there. I couldn't find where the water came from. I cleaned it up and decided to ignore it. One evening I walked into the living room after a shower, wearing just a towel around my waist. The lights were dim because another bulb had gone out. The statuette faced me again. I stood there breathing through my nose, feeling my heartbeat in my chest. My hands were damp from the shower. My throat felt dry. I spoke quietly. "I don't know what you want, but leave me alone." I waited for a few seconds, listening to the quiet hum of my refrigerator in the kitchen. Nothing happened. I approached the mantel and picked it up. It was cold to the touch. I turned it to face the wall again and pressed down to make sure it was stable. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the slight creaks in the hallway. It was an old building. My legs twitched. My head felt heavy. I got up around 2 a.m. and walked into the living room. I wanted to see if it had turned. I flicked on the overhead light. The bulb hummed and then dimmed slightly. The statuette looked straight ahead, not at me. I sighed and turned off the light. On my way back to the bedroom, I bumped my hip against the corner of the couch. It hurt. I swore under my breath. In the morning, I woke up to a strange sound in the kitchen. It was a low buzzing. I opened the fridge, and the sound got louder. I realized the new yogurt I bought the day before had gone bad already. It smelled awful. The buzzing came from flies trapped behind a shelf. I cleaned everything out again. As I did, I kept glancing into the living room. The statuette was not visible from the kitchen, but I knew it was there. After I was done cleaning, I walked over and grabbed it off the mantel. I took it to a closet in the hallway and placed it on a shelf behind some boxes. I closed the door, turned the lock, and walked away. I went to work feeling a bit better about it. I thought maybe it was just creeping me out visually. If I couldn't see it, maybe I would forget about it. That evening, I came home and checked the closet. It was still locked. I opened it. The statuette was on the shelf. It looked normal, just a porcelain face with a faint smile. I closed the closet and left it there. The next few days were quieter. My fridge was fine. My car didn't make weird noises. I stopped changing light bulbs every other day. I felt a sense of relief. I thought maybe I had imagined everything. I told myself I was just stressed out. I tried to focus on work, on keeping the apartment clean, on watching some late-night TV to relax. But after about a week, I woke up to find my kitchen window open. I know I had locked it. It's an old window that sticks, and I never open it fully because it's hard to close again. But that morning it was wide open. Cold air came in. My curtains were pushed aside. I closed it and checked the lock. Nothing seemed broken. I wondered if someone had tried to get in. I checked my valuables. Everything was still there. I looked in the closet. The statuette was still on the shelf, angled slightly to the left. It had been facing straight out before. I touched it to see if it was loose. It felt solid. I turned it forward again. That night I had trouble sleeping. I got up and walked through the hallway with a flashlight. I wanted to make sure everything was secure. I checked the windows and doors, then stood near the closet and listened. I heard nothing. I opened it and shone the flashlight inside. The statuette reflected the light. It looked the same. I backed out and closed the door. Then I heard a small scraping sound from the living room, quiet like something rubbing against a surface. I followed the sound with the flashlight, but found nothing. I checked under the couch, behind the TV stand, under the small table by the window. Still, I found nothing. I sat down on the couch, breathing slowly, tapping my foot on the floor. The next day, I decided to get rid of the statuette. I came home from work, took a small cardboard box, lined it with newspaper and put the statuette inside. I closed the box and taped it shut. I left it by the front door. I planned to throw it in the dumpster outside. I felt uneasy about it, but I knew I wanted it gone. My phone rang and I got distracted by a call from a friend asking about some old debt he owed me. When I got off the phone, I noticed a burning smell coming from the kitchen. My toaster oven was on even though I hadn't touched it. I turned it off and unplugged it. I walked back to the front door. The box was still there. I Picked it up and went downstairs to the dumpster. I lifted the lid and tossed it in. It landed on some old bags and cardboard. I closed the dumpster and went back upstairs. I locked my door and checked the windows again. I sat down on my couch and looked at my empty mantle. I turned on the TV and tried to watch something mindless. The apartment felt quieter. I listened to the sounds of traffic outside, my fridge humming softly in the background. There were no strange smells, and the lights stayed on without flickering. I started to relax. I got up to get a drink of water. My glass was clean and the water tasted normal. I leaned against the counter and listened to my own breathing. I felt tired. It had been a long few weeks. I threw away something my aunt gave me and I didn't feel bad about it. I just wanted to be left alone. I walked back to the living room, turned off the TV, and decided to go to bed early. I slept through the night without waking. In the morning, everything was fine. I left for work on time, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I never saw that statuette again. I didn't try to look for it, nor did I call my aunt or ask about it. I just carried on. Over the next few weeks, I replaced my light bulbs one last time. I checked my car's fluids and belts, and I bought new groceries that stayed fresh as they should. My home felt normal again. I guess that's all I ever wanted. I remember the first time it happened because it made no sense. It was about 3 weeks ago, late in the evening. I was sitting on my couch, flipping through some cheap reality shows with the volume low. My phone vibrated. The screen showed a blocked number. I picked it up and said hello. Several times. Nobody answered. I only heard breathing, slow, steady breathing. I listened for a few seconds, maybe 10 seconds, maybe more. Then I ended the call. I shrugged it off at first, a prank call. But right after that, my phone's battery dropped from around 60% straight down to 0. The phone went dark. It was odd, but I had no proof it was related. It could have been a glitch. I charged it overnight and forgot about it. But then it happened again 2 days later, almost at the same hour. The same blocked number, the same empty breathing, the same sudden battery drain. After this second time, I started to feel uneasy. I looked at the clock. It was around 11:30 p.m. The next time it happened was a few days later, again close to 11:30 p.m. I picked up and again there was the same breathing, same battery drain, same uneasiness inside my stomach. I began to feel a tightness in my chest. I started to sweat a little around my neck. My hands got tense. I paced around my living room, holding my dead phone in my hand, looking at its black screen, trying to understand what was happening. I decided to take some steps. The next day, I went to a phone repair shop. I told them my phone battery was acting strange, that it would drop suddenly to 0. They tested the battery and the charging port. They said everything seemed fine. They suggested maybe I was using a faulty app or leaving Bluetooth on. I knew that wasn't it. I don't run many apps. I don't leave Wi-Fi or Bluetooth on overnight. I keep it simple, but I didn't argue. I let them replace the battery anyway. It cost me some money, but I wanted to rule out any normal cause. That evening, I tried to stay calm. I watched the clock as it got close to 11:30 p.m. I held the phone in my hand, waiting. At around 11:34 p.m., the phone vibrated again, blocked number. I answered quietly. I heard the breathing again. No words. I kept my mouth shut and listened. The breathing sounded slow and controlled. Definitely a person. They were not in a hurry. They were just breathing. I waited a few seconds. I said, "Who is this?" No answer. I said, "If this is some kind of joke, it's not funny." Still no answer. Just breathing. I felt my heart rate go up. I felt the muscles in my shoulders tighten. I ended the call and watched as the battery indicator dropped from 70% to 0 in an instant. The phone turned off. I charged my phone again and tried to sleep. I couldn't sleep well. I turned over in bed. I got up and checked my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. Nothing. I looked out the window. Dark street. A few parked cars. A street light flickered. No one stood there watching. I tried to push the thoughts away. I managed to get a few hours of sleep. The next morning, I called my service provider. I explained that I was getting strange calls from a blocked number and asked if they could trace it. They said they couldn't. They said blocked calls often can't be traced easily. They said that if it continued, maybe I could file a police report. That got me a bit more worried. I was just dealing with some strange prank, right? But who would do this? And how would they cause my battery to die every time? That week, I tried to anticipate the call. One night, I turned my phone off before 11:30 p.m. and left it on my kitchen table. In the morning, the phone was on, completely drained, as if I had picked it up. It made no sense. I know for a fact that I turned it off, but there it was, battery at 0, screen black, and in the call logs, a blocked number call around 11:35 p.m. I felt pressure behind my eyes when I saw that. My hands felt stiff, and I swallowed hard. I had a strong urge to throw the phone against the wall, but I held back. I needed that phone, and I needed to understand what was going on. I tried a different tactic. I bought a cheap burner phone, prepaid phone from a small electronics store a few blocks away. I inserted a new SIM card. I gave that number to no one. I kept my main phone turned off one night and kept the new phone on. At about the same time as usual, the new phone vibrated. It said blocked number as well. This time I said nothing. I put it on speaker and listened. The same breathing. No voice, no words, just breathing. Then the battery on that brand new phone drained instantly, dropping from almost full to dead in a flash. My chest felt tight again. I rubbed my forehead and breathed in through my nose. Who the hell was doing this? They had to have some advanced trick. Or maybe they worked for the phone company. Maybe they had some device. I tried talking to my friend Mark about it at work. Mark and I share a small office. I explained the strange calls, the battery draining. Mark shrugged and said he'd never heard of something like that. He said maybe I should go to the police. I said maybe I would, but I knew the police wouldn't do much without a threat or harassment beyond just a weird call. I didn't know what to report anyway. I'm getting calls with breathing sounds. It would sound silly, but I was uneasy. I couldn't focus at work. I kept checking my phone, making sure the call logs were clean during the day. The calls never came during the day. They always came at night. I started to feel paranoia creeping into my daily life. Before leaving my apartment for work, I checked my door. I looked for scratches or signs of forced entry. I checked my windows. I checked behind furniture. I found nothing. I was wasting my time, but I couldn't stop. A few times I thought I saw shadows moving in the hallway outside my apartment late at night, but it could have been neighbors. I never saw anyone doing anything suspicious. Still, I felt my skin get clammy when I thought about the calls. Another night I tried to talk to whoever was on the line. As soon as I heard that breathing, I said, "Look, what do you want from me? I don't know who you are. If you need something, say it." Nothing, just breathing. I said, "Is this about money? Do you want money?" Silence. Breathing. I said, "I'm going to the police if you don't stop." No response. I ended the call and looked at the battery icon drop down again. I charged it and tried calling the number back, but of course it was blocked. I tried using a different phone to call my number during that time, but it got me nowhere. I went to a nearby police station the next day. I told them about the calls. They said without threats or harassment, beyond vague breathing, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested I contact my phone company's security department. I had done that already. They said to document the calls. So I started to write down each date and time of the call. I made a small notebook with times, battery levels, and how quickly the phone died after. I noticed a pattern. The calls always came around 11:30 to 11:40 p.m., usually on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, not every day, but always those 3 days of the week. I wondered what that meant. Was it related to my work schedule, my personal life? I tried thinking if I ever had a fight with someone who worked nights on those days, but I wasn't supposed to think too deeply or philosophically, so I stopped that line of thought. I just took note of the pattern. I tried waiting in my hallway on one of those nights. I stood there with my phone in my hand, watching the time. When 11:35 p.m. came, I felt the phone vibrate. I answered it right there in the hallway, breathing normally. I tried listening carefully, seeing if I could hear any background noise. I heard nothing, just the breathing. I looked around. The hallway was empty. The lights were dim. I smelled dust from the old carpeting. I felt sweat forming under my arms. I ended the call. The phone died. I tried to open the stairwell door quickly to see if anyone was on a different floor. Nothing. Empty. I didn't want to knock on neighbors' doors at that hour, so I went back inside my apartment. I locked the door and checked it twice. After a few days of this, I tried leaving my apartment at night and walking around outside during the time of the calls. I walked down the street, holding my phone, waiting. When the call came, I answered, breathing normally. I looked around at the parked cars. I checked to see if anyone was sitting inside a car with their headlights off. I saw nobody. I heard distant traffic. I smelled the damp sidewalk after some light rain. The air felt cold. My heart was beating fast. I said nothing into the phone. I ended the call. The phone died again. I held it tight in my hand, looking at the black screen. I turned it back on after a few minutes with a portable charger I had brought along, just to see if the call log showed anything different. Nothing new, just a blocked call. This was messing with my sleep. I began to dread those nights. I tried sleeping early, but I would wake up before the call. I couldn't sleep through it. I began to feel tension in my neck muscles all the time. I had a hard time eating properly. I kept my phone with me everywhere. I checked the door locks more than usual. I wondered if I was missing something obvious. Maybe it was an ex-girlfriend, a former coworker, but I couldn't think of anyone who had a reason to mess with me like this. Nobody had ever mentioned draining batteries as a prank. This seemed too strange. One night, I tried speaking calmly to the caller again. I said, "I know you know who I am. You call me at the same time. You never speak. If you have something to say it." No answer. I said, "If this is personal, then you have my attention. If you want me to do something, leave a note. Just stop messing with my phone." I ended the call feeling my throat tighten. The phone died. The next morning, I found a small piece of paper slipped under my door. It had no handwriting on it, just a single printed line. "Stop changing your routine." I stared at that note for a long time. My stomach felt heavy. Someone knew I was trying to catch them. They knew I had changed phones. They knew I tried waiting outside and in the hallway. They were watching me. I looked at the door gap, the small space under the door. I could slide a note under it easily. Anyone could, but who and when? It must have happened during the night. I felt like something was inside my chest pressing against my ribs. I sat on the floor, took deep breaths, and smelled the dusty carpet and the faint odor of cleaning products. My heart was pounding. I took the note and put it in my desk drawer. I did not call the police again because the note wasn't exactly a threat. It was a message. They wanted me to stick to my normal habits. I had no idea why. I decided to follow the routine again. I stayed in my apartment at night, watched TV at low volume, and stopped checking the hallway. I still got the calls, the breathing and the battery draining, but at least I had no more notes. I tried ignoring it. I tried acting like it was a nuisance, not something dangerous. My hand still shook a bit when the phone vibrated. I tried using a recording device to capture the call audio. I used a small digital recorder next to the phone. When the call came, I held the phone close to the recorder. After the call ended, I checked the recording. I heard the vibration, the answering, and the breathing. There were no strange background noises or voices, just breathing. I replayed it again and again. The breathing was steady and calm. I wondered if the caller was wearing something to hide their voice. I noticed no changes, regardless of what I tried. The next call came as usual, with no differences. A few nights later, I tried answering and staying silent for longer than before. I listened to the breathing for about a full minute. It never sped up or slowed down. My own breathing got faster as I waited. I felt sweat on my forehead, tasted salt on my lips. I heard a slight creak from somewhere in my apartment, maybe just the building settling, but it made me jump a bit. Then I ended the call and watched my phone battery die again. I charged it silently and went to bed. I tried telling another friend about the situation. He said maybe it was a hacker or someone using signal jamming. I doubted it. He suggested going off the grid for a while, but I needed my phone for work. I needed my normal routine. I decided to try ignoring the calls completely, not answering them. If I let it ring, maybe it would stop, but the phone would keep vibrating. Eventually it would go silent and I'd find the battery drained anyway, with a missed call from a blocked number. If I turned off my phone before the usual call time, I would wake up to find it drained in a missed call. There was no way to avoid the call draining my battery. I checked my apartment buildings, security cameras. The landlord let me see a few days of footage, but there was nothing unusual in the hallways around 11:30 p.m. No one approached my door. Whoever left that note must have done it carefully. Maybe they lived in the building or knew blind spots. I couldn't identify anyone suspicious from those low-quality videos. I tried changing my phone number. The next week, the call still came. That meant it was not random. They knew my new number within a day. I had no idea how. I tried getting a second SIM card again. Same results. I tried leaving both phones off and locked in a drawer. The next morning they were both dead and had missed calls. I tried wrapping one phone in aluminum foil just out of desperation to block signals. The next day, same thing, blocked call, dead phone. My routine became narrow. I woke up, charged my phone, went to work, worked quietly, came home, watched some TV, got the call, lost my battery, charged again, slept badly. I repeated this for days. I tried not to think about why it was happening. I focused only on the facts. The calls came a few times a week. They always happened at about the same time. The caller never spoke. The caller somehow knew everything I did to avoid them. The caller left one note telling me to stop changing my routine, which was enough to keep me in line. I stopped trying to outsmart them and accepted the calls. I answered, listened to the breathing, ended the call, charged the phone, and went to bed. This continued for another week, then 2 weeks. The calls never changed. No new notes, no new threats, just breathing and a dead battery afterward. I started to relax a bit, or at least feel numb. I turned on the TV late at night, kept the volume low, and waited for the call. When it came, I answered and said nothing. After a few seconds, I ended the call. My hands no longer shook as much. My stomach still felt uneasy, but less so. I realized I might never get an answer. Whoever was calling knew everything I did. They wanted me to stick to my normal life. Maybe they just wanted me to know they could reach me anytime. I still have no explanation. It's been going on for a while now. I don't know how long I'll put up with it, but this is the story. It's not exciting or dramatic in some big way, but it's unsettling. I still get those calls, and I still can't stop them. I've accepted that for now. This is my life. I keep my phone charged. I keep to my usual schedule, and I open the door slowly when I leave, checking the hallway, but I don't go looking around anymore. I don't call the police. I don't try new phones. I just live with it. It's the only way I can stay calm. And every time my phone vibrates late at night with that blocked number, I pick it up, listen to the breathing, and wait for it to end. I still remember every detail of that night. I was on my way back home after a long drive. I was tired. I had planned to push through and reach my apartment before sunrise, but my eyes felt heavy and my back hurt from sitting behind the wheel for hours. Around midnight, I decided to stop at a small motel just off the highway. The sign out front was old and dirty. The parking lot was empty except for my car and a faded blue pickup near the manager's office. The guy at the front desk was a middle-aged man wearing a plain t-shirt and jeans. His eyes looked red as if he had just woken up. He handed me a key and said I could take room 12. He told me he didn't have many guests that night, and then he went back to staring at the small TV behind the counter. I walked to my room, passing a few doors with chipped paint and old metal handles. The motel's hallway had old carpets that smelled stale. The light above my door flickered. Room 12 was at the end of the row. I turned the key, pushed open the door, and switched on the lights inside. The room was small, just a bed, a nightstand, a dresser with a TV on top, and a thin door that connected to the next room. There was a bathroom to the left with a yellowed sink and a shower that looked like it hadn't been updated in decades. I locked the door behind me. I tossed my backpack on the bed and sat down. It felt lumpy. The sheets looked clean enough, though. I didn't care much at that point. I just wanted to sleep a few hours and continue my drive in the morning. I turned off the lights and lay down. The bed creaked when I moved. Outside, I could hear the hum of the highway. The walls were thin. I could hear the quiet buzz of a neon sign outside and some muffled sound from the room next door. At first, I thought maybe someone had checked in after me, but the front desk guy said it was almost empty. I listened closer. It sounded like a voice, but I couldn't make out words. It was just a low mumble like someone talking to themselves. I got up and pressed my ear to the thin door that separated my room from the next one. The voice became clearer, but not by much. It was a man's voice, or maybe a woman's voice, pitched low. It didn't sound angry or upset. It just sounded like someone talking quietly, maybe pacing around. I couldn't hear footsteps though, just that low voice. I knocked lightly on the door. There was no answer. I listened again. The voice kept going without reacting to my knock. I tried the doorknob. It was locked. I figured it wasn't my business. Maybe they were on the phone. I went back to bed and forced myself to sleep. The next morning, I woke early. The voice from next door had stopped at some point. I showered quickly. The water pressure was weak, and the hot water took a long time to come. I dried off, got dressed, and went to the front desk to ask about the room next door. The same guy was there now in a gray hoodie. He looked just as tired as before. I said, "Hey, quick question. Is anyone staying in room 11? He looked at a clipboard on the counter. He flipped through some pages. "No," he said. "Only you and the guy in room 3 who checked out early this morning." I frowned. I heard someone talking in there last night. He shrugged. "Walls are thin. Maybe you heard something else. That room is empty." I didn't push it. I got a coffee from a machine in the corner and stepped outside to get some air. The sky was clear and it was cold enough that I could see my breath. My car was still there. Nobody else was around. I got behind the wheel and turned the key. The engine struggled. I tried again. Nothing. The battery light flickered on the dashboard. I popped the hood and checked the connections. The battery cables seemed fine. I checked the oil. Everything looked okay, but the car wouldn't start. I tried a few more times. No luck. I walked back inside the office. The manager frowned when he saw me. "Car won't start," I said. "Is there a mechanic nearby?" He told me there was a small auto shop about a mile down the road, but it probably wouldn't open until later. I decided I might as well book another night and wait. The manager looked at me for a moment like he was annoyed, then nodded and took my money. He handed me the same key. I went back to my room. It was still early, maybe 8 a.m. I set my stuff down and turned on the TV to pass the time. The channels were mostly static, but I found the local news and left it on. After a while, I got bored and decided to check out the room next door. If it was empty, maybe I could figure out why I heard voices. Maybe there was some vent connecting them. Maybe the voice was coming from outside. The walls were really thin. I stepped out into the hallway and tried room 11's doorknob. Locked. I walked back to the office and asked if I could see the empty room. I said I was curious about the layouts, that I might switch rooms if my car repair took longer. The manager gave me a quick cold look and said, "I'd rather you stay where you are. We don't have a maid today and that room's not ready." I didn't want to argue, so I nodded and went back outside. My car still wouldn't start. I tried calling roadside assistance, but my phone kept losing signal. I got frustrated and walked to the auto shop. The place was closed. I looked through the dusty window and saw a cluttered workbench and a calendar from last year. I waited around for half an hour, but nobody showed up. I walked back to the motel. By the time I returned, it was close to noon. The manager was gone, and a younger guy was at the desk. He had earbuds in and was staring at his phone. I asked him if he knew when the mechanic would show up. He shrugged and said, "I don't know." I decided to wait in my room. I spent the rest of the day reading an old magazine I found in the nightstand. I tried the TV again. Mostly nothing worked except for static. The walls were so thin that I could hear the guy at the front desk coughing. Once in a while a car would drive past on the highway, but not often. The place felt dead, quiet, and stale. As evening came, I got hungry. The motel didn't have a restaurant, but there was a vending machine near the office. I got a couple of candy bars and some chips. I ate them in my room and drank water from the bathroom sink, which tasted a bit off, but I was thirsty. It got dark. I turned off the overhead light and lay on the bed, where the old mattress springs dug into my back. I tried to relax and clear my mind, though I wasn't comfortable staying another night. My car was still dead and no help had arrived. Then I heard it again, that low voice, from next door. It started with a soft hum, like someone talking to themselves. I got up and pressed my ear to the connecting door. The voice was clearer this time. At first it just said something like, "I'm here," over and over. I knocked again, louder than the night before. "Hello?" There was no answer, but the voice kept going. It sounded like a whisper, but not quite, more like someone speaking through a thin sheet. The tone was calm, but strange. I backed away and went outside to see if there was a window to that room. There was one. I looked through the dirty glass, but the lights were off, so I couldn't see inside. When I tried to open it, I found it was locked. I pressed my ear to the window again. Nothing, just silence outside. I returned to my room, locked the door, and turned on the light. I pressed my ear to the connecting door again. The voice said my name, and I heard it clearly. It said my name in a flat tone. I stood there, heart pounding. My mouth felt dry. My hands felt sweaty. I stepped back. I said, "Who are you?" No reply. Just the sound of someone breathing softly. I got angry. I rattled the doorknob. It was still locked. I said, "Knock it off." Nothing. The voice stopped. I waited, listening to my own breathing. After a few minutes, I turned off the light and tried to lie down, but couldn't relax. I left the room and went to the office. The younger guy wasn't there. The place was empty and the door was unlocked. I stepped behind the counter and looked at the registry. I found my name on today's date. Room 12. There was no other guest listed. Room 11 was blank. No name, no signature, no payment. It was empty. I heard a small sound behind me. I turned fast, but nobody was there. Just a TV on mute in the corner. I flipped through the pages again. A few names from the past week were all in other rooms, crossed out. No mention of anyone in room 11. I felt my heart pounding. I went back to my room and turned on the bathroom light. I washed my face with cold water. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red. My hair was messy. I wanted to leave this place, but my car was useless. The voice started up again, calling my name 3 times. I stood next to the connecting door. I could feel a draft coming from under it. I bent down and looked at the gap. I saw something move, maybe a shadow. I got down on my knees and tried to look under the door. It was too dark to see much. I slid a piece of paper underneath. It slid into the next room easily. I waited to see if someone would push it back. Nothing happened. I stood up, pressed my palm against the door and said, "Who are you? What do you want?" The voice said something I couldn't understand, just a few short words. I backed away, grabbed my backpack, took out my flashlight and a small folding knife I keep for emergencies, and clicked the flashlight on. I aimed it at the door frame. It looked normal, just painted wood and cheap metal hinges. I checked the window to the parking lot, still my car in the old blue pickup. No one else around. The motel was silent, except for that voice. I decided to wait it out. Maybe whoever it was would give up. I lay on the bed, holding my flashlight, my eyes on the door. After a while, I heard a soft scraping sound. It sounded like something sliding against the door from the other side. I got up and checked the gap again. I saw the piece of paper I slid under the door. It was pushed back. I picked it up. On the paper, in shaky handwriting, was my name. I dropped it and backed away. My heart was pounding. I felt sweat under my arms. I said, "Mario, stop messing with me." The voice said nothing. I only heard breathing. In silence. I waited, tense. Nothing happened for a long time. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at that door. The air felt heavy. I could smell dust and old fabric. My head hurt. At some point I must have dozed off because I jerked awake when I heard a soft tap. The lights were still on. I looked at the door. I thought I saw the doorknob turn slightly, but it might have been my imagination. I stood up and approached it, but it was still locked. I tried my door to the hallway and stepped out. Everything was quiet. No one was at the desk. Outside it was still dark, maybe 3 a.m. or so. I decided I couldn't stay here another night. As soon as morning came, I'd walk until I found help. I went back inside and started packing. I heard nothing from the next room. It stayed quiet. I kept looking at the connecting door, expecting it to move or rattle, but it didn't. I sat in the chair and watched the clock on my phone. The battery was low. I couldn't get a signal. The motel phone on the nightstand had no dial tone. I ate another candy bar and drank some more water. I waited for sunrise. At dawn, I stepped outside with my bags. The sky was pale blue. I tried my car again. No luck. I went to the office. The older manager was there now. He looked at me with a flat expression. I said, "I'm leaving. I'll walk." He nodded. He didn't ask why. I stared at him. "I heard someone in room 11, I said. "They said my name. I know that sounds crazy, but it happened." He looked at me with no reaction. He shrugged. "Room 11 is empty," he said. "Maybe you were tired." I didn't argue. I turned around. I lifted my backpack and started walking down the road. I didn't look back. I walked until I found a gas station with a payphone. I called a friend to pick me up. It took hours for him to arrive, but I waited. I didn't return to the motel. I didn't check the room again. I left it behind. I still think about that voice sometimes. I remember hearing my name, clear as day, through that thin door. I remember finding no record of anyone staying next to me. I remember a piece of paper with my name scrawled on it. I don't have a good explanation for what happened, but I know what I heard. That's all there is to it. On my third evening at my uncle's farm, I noticed a strange flickering inside the old barn across the field. I had arrived 2 days earlier with a simple plan: rest for a week in a quiet place away from the city. My uncle had a small farmhouse and a large stretch of land. He told me over the phone that I could stay there alone, use whatever I needed, and enjoy some calm evenings. He said he wouldn't be around much. He mentioned that the old barn was empty. It had been empty for years. He said no one used it, and it needed repairs. The roof leaked, the wooden walls were warped, and most tools had been moved elsewhere. He said there was no reason to go inside. On the first 2 days, nothing unusual happened. I woke up, ate something simple like bread and eggs, walked around, checked the old tractor, and sat in the living room reading old newspapers. The evenings were quiet. There were a few distant sounds of insects and maybe a fox or two. The nights were dark. The nearest neighbor was a couple of miles away. I didn't hear any engines. I didn't see any people, and I didn't feel anything strange. But on that third evening, just as the sun was low and the sky was turning a dull orange, I glanced through the window in the living room and saw a faint blinking light inside the barn. At first I thought it could be a reflection, or maybe some tool catching the last rays of the sun, but it continued for a few seconds, then stopped, then started again. It was weak and irregular. It looked like someone inside was switching a flashlight on and off. I stared at it, trying to make sense of it. The barn was about 100 yards away, close enough for me to see its shape clearly, but too far to see details. As I watched, I saw a brief movement in the dusty window on the barn's front side. Something or someone passed by inside. I felt a strange tension in my legs. My neck got stiff. I wondered if there was a trespasser. I didn't want to panic. There were no signs of forced entry in the farmhouse, and I had locked the front door. I remembered my uncle's words. The barn is empty. I kept looking. The light inside flickered a few more times, then stopped. I waited. I pulled on a jacket and stepped outside. There was a slight chill in the air. I walked across the yard, past the old water pump and the wood pile, heading straight toward the barn. As I approached, I could hear something. It sounded like quiet laughter, low and muffled. I couldn't make out words. It lasted maybe 10 or 15 seconds, then ended. I stopped about 10 feet from the barn's main door, which was closed. I tried to listen, holding my breath. Inside, I heard soft footsteps on the wooden floor. I heard another short burst of laughter. It sounded calm, not frantic. I saw a shadow cross the window. I couldn't see details, just a dark shape moving inside. I stepped closer and placed my hand on the barn door. It felt cold. I pushed it gently, but it didn't budge. It seemed locked or blocked from the inside. Then everything inside went silent. The laughter stopped, the footsteps stopped, and the light inside vanished. I pressed my ear against the wood. I heard nothing. My heart was beating fast. I tried to open the door again, this time with more force, but it didn't move. There was a large padlock on the outside latch. I remembered seeing it before. It looked old and rusted. I had no key. I walked around the side, stepping over some loose boards and weeds. I checked the side window. It was dusty. I wiped the glass with my sleeve and tried to see in. It was dark. There was a smell of old hay and damp wood, but I heard no voices. I circled back to the front and waited another minute, but nothing happened. I walked back to the farmhouse, locked the front door, and stayed inside for the rest of the evening. I turned off the lights and watched from the window. There were no more flickers. I stayed up until midnight, but the barn remained dark and still. Eventually, I went to bed. I slept lightly, waking up a few times to listen for any sounds outside. I heard a few creaks, maybe just the old house. I forced myself to sleep again. In the morning, I went outside to check. The grass was damp with dew. I walked toward the barn, following the same path as before. When I got there, I noticed footprints. They started at the barn door and led straight across the field toward the farmhouse. I followed them carefully. They were shallow but clear enough in the soft ground. They weren't mine. My boots left a different pattern. These prints were smaller, maybe from someone wearing old shoes. They continued all the way to the farmhouse's outer wall, directly beneath the window where I had slept. The ground there was disturbed, as if someone stood for a while looking up at my window. Then the footprints returned the same way, heading back toward the barn. But near the barn they faded. I tried to see where they ended. It looked like they just disappeared near a patch of dry dirt. I walked around to see if there were any other marks. Nothing. I felt uneasy. My chest felt heavy. My uncle said no one should be around here. I pulled out my phone. No reception here. I considered driving into town and calling someone, maybe the local sheriff, but I decided to wait. I didn't want to overreact. Maybe some drifter was using the barn. Maybe it was just someone playing a prank. The footprints worried me, though. I didn't like the idea of someone standing outside my window at night. I spent the rest of the morning checking the property. I searched the tool shed behind the house. Everything looked normal. I checked the old chicken coop. Empty. I checked the tractor parked in the small garage. Nothing unusual. I kept an eye on the barn. It was quiet. In the afternoon, I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee and stared at it. There was no movement. Nothing stirred inside. I wondered if I should try breaking the lock on the barn door. It didn't feel right. It was in my property. My uncle told me not to bother with it. As evening came again, I prepared myself. I brought a flashlight and a crowbar and left them by the door inside the house. I kept the front door locked. I left a small lamp on in the living room. I decided to watch from inside. Around the same time as the previous day, right when the sky was getting dark, I noticed movement near the barn again. A faint light flickered in the window, not as bright as a flashlight, but enough to see a glow. I thought I heard low voices, but I couldn't make out words. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. I walked slowly, stopping halfway across the field. From there I could see shadows moving inside the barn. 2 shapes, maybe 3. They moved back and forth in front of the dusty window. I heard quiet laughter again. I shouted towards them. I said, "Who's there?" The laughter stopped. The barn went dark. I waited a minute. No one answered. I moved closer and tried the door again. It was still locked. I hit it with my hand. I said, "I know someone's in there." There was no response. I walked around the barn again. It was dark inside. I checked every window but couldn't see anything. I heard a soft scraping sound, like someone dragging a foot on the floorboards inside. I tried peering through a gap in the wooden wall. I saw nothing but darkness. The barn smelled old and rotten. I felt a sting in my nostrils. My mouth was dry. I felt sweat on my back. I stepped on a loose board on the ground outside and it made a sharp crack. I waited. Nothing happened. I returned to the farmhouse and locked the door. I paced around inside, checking the windows and making sure they were shut. I turned off the lights and stood by the window, watching the barn. I stayed there for 2 hours. No more flickers. No more laughter. Eventually I got tired and sat down on the couch. I kept the flashlight on the table beside me. I dozed off at some point. I woke with a start around midnight. I thought I heard something outside, a creaking sound near the porch. I got up and moved slowly towards the window. I saw nothing outside, but it was too dark to see the barn clearly. I waited, straining my ears. I heard a distant rustling sound, maybe in the grass. I couldn't see what it was. I didn't sleep well that night. I woke up early in the morning. The first thing I did was go outside to check for footprints again. Sure enough, there were new footprints starting from the barn door and leading straight to the farmhouse. They ended under the same window as before. The ground was damp, and these prints looked fresh. Whoever was doing this came back at night, stood under my window, and then returned to the barn. But how were they getting inside if the barn door was locked from the outside with an old padlock? Unless the lock was just stuck and not actually locked. Or maybe there was another entrance on the other side. I decided I couldn't just wait and watch another night. I had to get inside that barn and see what was there. I got a hammer and some old tools from the tool shed. I walked straight to the barn door. I examined the padlock. It looked rusted shut. I hit it a few times with the hammer, but the lock didn't break. I tried prying it with a crowbar. Eventually the lock snapped and the hasp fell loose. I pulled the barn door open. It made a loud scraping sound. Inside, it was dark and dusty. I turned on my flashlight and stepped in. The barn was mostly empty. The floor was covered in dirt and old straw. There were a few empty feed troughs in a corner and a broken chair lying on its side. I saw no footprints inside. The dust on the floor looked undisturbed. There were no tools, no boxes, nothing to explain the lights or the laughter. I checked the walls. Some boards were loose, and I saw a few cracks where light could have shone through from outside, but nothing significant. I searched for any hidden doors. Nothing. The ladder leading to the loft was broken. I shone my flashlight up there and saw only old beams and spider webs. I spent a good hour in that barn, searching carefully. I found nothing unusual. The place smelled stale. There were no candles, no batteries, no signs of anyone sleeping there. There was no explanation for the footprints or the laughter. I left the barn and walked around it. I checked the ground outside. The footprints from last night were there in the grass, leading right to the farmhouse. But on the barn side, there was no clear sign of how someone entered or left. The lock had been intact before I broke it, and the door hadn't been open for a long time, judging by the way it stuck when I pulled it. I had no answers. I stood there for a while looking at the barn, thinking about what I saw. I felt tired and unsettled. I decided I wouldn't stay another night. I went inside the farmhouse, packed my bag, and locked up. I got in my car and drove into town. I planned to call my uncle and tell him everything. I didn't know what was going on out there, but I didn't want to be alone with it any longer. I will never forget the first time I saw him. It was late around 3 a.m., and I was standing by my bedroom window. I often stayed up until that hour because I had trouble sleeping. Most nights, I would scroll through my phone or pace around the apartment until I felt tired. That night, I paused by the window and looked down at the alley behind the building. The alley was narrow and empty most of the time. There were a few garbage cans and a broken streetlight in the side of a red brick wall that belonged to the building next door. Nothing ever happened there. It was usually quiet. But that night, I noticed a man standing below, facing one of the walls at the far end of the alley. He wore a black jacket and gray pants. His shoes looked dark and worn. He stood in the same spot, looking at the wall without moving. His posture seemed stiff. I remember watching him for a minute or two, but he didn't change his position. He didn't lean or shuffle his feet. He just stood there with his face toward that wall. I thought it was strange, but I didn't feel alarmed. I just wondered what he was doing. I kept seeing him after that. Every night, and around the same time, I would look out the window and there he was. He always wore the same clothes. He always stood facing that wall in the same way. He never turned around. He never looked at anything else. He never left while I was watching. I would eventually get too tired, go to bed. By the time I looked again in the morning, he was gone. I got used to this pattern. It became a habit. Before I tried to sleep, I would look out my window just to see if the man was there. He always was. It made me curious. I tried to guess what he might be doing. Was he homeless? Was he drunk? Was he waiting for someone? None of it made sense. He never moved. I never saw him eat, smoke, or do anything with his hands. They were always at his sides. His head stayed level, facing forward. As days passed, I accepted this as a nightly event. I didn't know who he was, but I got used to him. It was like seeing a tree or a mailbox on the street. It was always there, so I stopped feeling surprised. Instead, I would just look at him for a while and then turn off the lights and try to sleep. It didn't feel like a threat. It felt odd, but harmless. One night, after maybe a month of this routine, something changed. I approached the window as usual. The clock on my phone showed 3:09 a.m. I put my face close to the glass and looked down. He was there, of course, in the same spot. At first, he was facing the wall like always. I watched him for a bit. My eyes felt heavy. I considered lying down and trying to sleep. Before I did that, I leaned forward just a bit more, pressing my forehead lightly against the window to get a better look. The streetlights were weak, but I could see his clothes clearly. Then, as I was about to turn away, he moved. He turned his body toward my building. This took me by surprise. He had never changed position before when I watched him. Now he was facing me. I stared, confused. I expected to see his face. Instead, I saw something that made my chest tighten and my breathing stop for a moment. He had no face, there were no eyes, no nose, no mouth. There was skin, or something like skin, stretched smooth and blank. There was hair on his head, it looked short and dark. But where his face should have been, there was nothing. It was like looking at the back of someone's head, but it was at the front. I felt my body tense. I leaned back from the window, my heart pounding. I tried to make sense of what I saw. Maybe it was a mask. Maybe it was some kind of hood. I tried to calm down. I took a deep breath and looked again. He was looking straight at my window. I couldn't see eyes, but his head was tilted in my direction. I felt sure he was aware of me. He stood still like before, no twitching, no swaying. Just that smooth, featureless face pointed at me. My stomach felt heavy. My mouth went dry. I was not used to feeling that kind of nervous tension. I wanted to step away from the window, but I kept staring. I didn't know what else to do. I stood there for a few minutes, uncertain. Then I reached for my phone. I turned down the brightness and aimed the camera at the window. I wanted to take a picture. My hands were shaking. I pressed the camera button. The result looked dark and grainy. I couldn't see much detail on the screen. I tried to zoom in, but the quality got worse. I took another picture, then a short video. I looked at what I recorded and felt frustrated. It was too dark, and I couldn't see his face clearly. In the images, he just looked like a dark shape. No proof of what I was seeing. I tried tapping the window gently. There was no response. He stood there, silent and still. I didn't want to open the window or call out. Something about him made me feel that would be a bad idea. I backed away, turned off the light in my room, and sat on my bed. I tried to think. If it was a mask, who would do that every night for weeks without any reaction? If it was some sort of costume, why stand there doing nothing? How did he know I was there watching him? I realized I never turned the lights on before checking the alley. I usually kept my room dark so I could see outside better. Maybe he saw my silhouette. Maybe he somehow sensed I was there. None of this explained the lack of a face. I waited an hour and then checked again. He was gone. I looked at the empty alley and felt a mix of relief and worry. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I kept waking up to check the time, wondering if he would come back. The next night, I waited a bit longer before looking outside. I wanted to see if he was there again. At around 3:30 a.m., I slowly approached the window. I kept the lights off. I peered down. There he was. He was facing the wall again, just like the old times. I felt my body tense. My hands were cold. I watched him without moving. After a few minutes, he slowly turned around and looked right at my window again. I sucked in a sharp breath. No face. Nothing there. Just that same blank surface. He held his position. He didn't step forward, raise his arms, or do anything else. He only looked in my direction. I couldn't tell if he was looking at me, but it felt that way. I felt trapped, like if I moved too much, he would know. I backed away again and sat down on the floor. My heart was beating hard. I rubbed my eyes and pressed my hands against my temples. I tried to listen for any sound. The night was quiet, except for the faint hum of the building's heating system and distant traffic. But I couldn't hear him. I stood up again and looked out. He was still there. I whispered to myself, asking what he wanted. Of course, there was no answer. I spent the next few days thinking about him. I avoided telling anyone. I didn't know what to say. I see a guy with no face in an alley at 3 a.m. would sound insane. I wasn't sure if I believed it myself, but I knew what I had seen. It was not normal. I considered calling the police, but what would I report? A man standing in an alley isn't a crime. He never threatened me, he just stood there. Also, I was worried that if I involved anyone else, he might disappear, and no one would believe me. I tried going to bed earlier to avoid seeing him, but that didn't work. I couldn't sleep. My mind would race, and I'd get up, go to the window, and check. He was always there, facing the wall. If I waited long enough, he would turn and look at me. The strain of this nightly routine began to affect me. I felt tired during the day. I started making small mistakes at work. I would forget to reply to emails or lose track of what I was doing. I tried drinking coffee to stay alert, but it only made me feel jumpy. I stopped looking forward to going home in the evening. I worried about the hours passing and that moment at night when I would see him again. One evening, I decided to stay by the window all night and watch him closely. I turned off all the lights in my apartment, sat on a chair near the window, and waited. It was around 2:50 a.m. when I took my position. I waited in silence. At around 3:05 a.m., I saw him step into the alley. He seemed to appear from the left side, walking slowly and calmly. He wore the same clothes. When he reached his usual spot, he faced the wall right away. He stood very still. I watched him for at least half an hour. I saw no movement. Then, as if following a schedule, he turned around. He lifted his head slightly and aimed that blank face at my window. My stomach tightened. I tried not to make any noise. He stood like that for at least 5 minutes, maybe longer. Then he turned back to the wall. I waited. He did nothing else. Eventually, my eyes burned from staring. I blinked a lot. I tried to see if there was anything different about his clothes or his posture. There wasn't. He seemed exactly the same every night. At around 4:11 a.m., I saw him take a single step to the right, then face the wall again. That was new. I tried to see if there was something on the wall he was looking at. The alley's light was weak, and I couldn't see much detail, just old bricks and some graffiti, maybe a small pipe, nothing else. I watched him for another hour. Then I had to blink and look away for a moment to relieve my eyes. When I looked back, he was gone. I hadn't seen him leave. It was as if he had vanished in an instant when I wasn't looking. The next night, I tried something different. I wanted more lights. Before going to the window, I took a small flashlight and angled it out of another window down the hall. I placed it so it would shine into the alley from a different angle. I hoped it would give me a clearer view. At 3:00 a.m., I looked out again. He was there. He turned toward me as expected. With the extra light, I could see his clothes better. The jacket looked worn, the gray pants had some stains near the knees, and his shoes were black sneakers with white soles. I still couldn't see a face. The skin at that blank space looked pale and slightly uneven, like old plaster. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. My breathing was shallow. I backed away and left the flashlight in place. I wondered if he noticed the extra light. It didn't change his behavior. He looked at me, then turned back to the wall. Eventually, he disappeared. I became more agitated. I began checking the alley during the day. I leaned out of my window and looked down to see if there was any sign that someone stood there at night. I saw footprints in dried mud, but they could have been anyone's. I checked the walls. There were old tags sprayed by teenagers, a few chipped bricks, and a small piece of metal pipe sticking out. I saw no clues. I considered going down there in person at night, but I felt afraid. I didn't know what he would do if I approached him. I considered bringing a bat or a metal pipe for protection, but it felt risky. I didn't know if he was dangerous. He never made a move toward me, but he also never acknowledged me in a normal way. His lack of a face made me feel that he wasn't right. Maybe he wasn't even human. I tried not to think like that, but I had no other explanation. Over the following week, I lost more sleep. I would wake up 2 or 3 times each night to check the alley. He was always there, always the same routine, facing the wall, then turning to face me, then eventually going back and disappearing. I stopped feeling curious and started feeling trapped. I wanted to move. I wanted to leave the apartment, but that would be expensive. I didn't have extra money to break the lease and find a new place. I also felt stupid leaving just because of a strange guy outside. Still, I knew that something was wrong. No normal person would do that every night. No normal person would have a blank face. A few nights later, I noticed a change. I saw him stand at the same spot as usual. When he turned to face me, he took 2 steps forward. He then stopped and faced me again. I was gripped by a strong tension in my legs and shoulders. Sweat formed under my shirt. I didn't know what to do. I stood still watching him. He stood still looking at me. Then he backed up 2 steps and faced the wall again. I didn't understand the purpose of that movement. It felt like a test. Maybe he was checking how I would react. I moved a little behind the curtain, hoping he wouldn't see me, but I was sure he did. The next night, he repeated that behavior. This time, he took 3 steps toward my building. He stood closer than before. I could see more details of his head. Short, dark, and slightly messy hair. Skin with a slight shine under the dim light. No eyes, no mouth, nothing. He stood there for about a minute, then stepped back again. When he turned back to face the wall, I exhaled heavily and wiped my forehead with my hand. I felt tense and tired. I wondered if I should try making noise to scare him away. Maybe bang on the window or shout. But what if that provoked him? Another night came. I stood ready by the window with my phone in my hand. I wanted to record a better video. I waited until he turned toward me and started stepping forward again. This time, he took 4 steps. He was closer to the building's back wall. If I opened my window and leaned out, I could have dropped something near him. I pressed record on my phone, holding it as steady as I could. The image was still too dark. I tried zooming in, but it looked grainy. I cursed under my breath. While I was focused on the phone, I noticed movements. He raised his right arm slowly and pointed at me. There was a hand with 5 fingers. The skin looked normal. He held his arm straight, pointing up toward my window. I felt a burst of panic. My throat tightened. I stopped recording and backed away quickly. I didn't hear anything, but I felt as if a cold draft had entered my room. My heart was beating fast. When I looked out again, he was facing the wall and lowering his arm. I stood there breathing hard, not knowing what to do. I considered calling the police that night. I picked up my phone, dialed the non-emergency line, and then hung up. I didn't know how to explain. I could say there was a suspicious person in the alley. The police might send a car to check, but what would they find? If he disappeared, or if they caught him and he looked normal, I would look like a fool. I decided to wait. Maybe he would go away on his own. He didn't. The next night, at 3 a.m., I saw him again. This time, as soon as he turned toward me, I opened the window a crack. I leaned out and said, "Hey." I tried to keep my voice steady and low. There was no response. He stood still. I said it again, louder. "Hey, what are you doing there?" He didn't move. I listened for any sound from him. Nothing. He just faced me. I closed the window and locked it. I felt exposed. I kept watching. After a minute, he took a step forward and raised his arm again, pointing at me. I stared at that blank face. I told myself, this is crazy. I tapped the glass with my fingernail. No reaction. He kept pointing. Then he slowly lowered his arm, turned back to the wall, and stood still. I decided I needed to gather evidence. The next day, I bought a small tripod and a better camera. I set it up by my window before 3 a.m. I aimed it at the alley, adjusted the focus, and hit record. When he appeared, I tried to stay calm and keep quiet. I watched through the camera's display as he followed his usual pattern. He faced the wall, then turned toward me, stepped forward, pointed, and then stepped back. I got it all on video. But when I played it back later, the image was too dark to see details of his face. All I saw was a figure standing, turning and pointing. No one would believe that he had no face from that video. It would look like a guy in dark clothes. The lack of facial features would just look like bad lighting. I felt frustrated. Over the following nights, my sleep got worse. I started feeling sick, my head hurt, I ate less, and I drank more coffee. I felt anxious about the nighttime. I tried staying out late, going for walks at midnight, but I always ended up back at the apartment, staring at the alley by 3 a.m. He never failed to appear. His presence felt like a weight pushing down on me. I tried to ignore him one night to see what would happen. I stayed away from the window and went to my living room, watching TV with the volume low. After an hour, I couldn't resist. I had to check. When I looked out the window, he was still there, facing my direction. I felt a knot in my chest. It was as if he knew I was there all along, refusing to acknowledge him and waiting for me to look. One night, I tried something else. I went down the stairs very slowly and quietly, reaching the ground floor and opening the back door of the building just a crack. I peeked at him from ground level, feeling my legs shake and my breathing grow shallow. I leaned my head out just enough to see the alley. He was there, standing about 20 feet away. From this angle, he looked taller, maybe 6 feet or a bit more, with his arms at his sides and facing a plain and empty wall. I waited. Then after a minute or two, he turned slowly toward the building. I ducked behind the door, my heart pounding. I waited a few seconds, then peeked again. He was facing my direction. I was pretty sure he knew I was there. A chill ran down my neck. I closed the door carefully, locked it, and went back upstairs. That was the last time I tried to get close to him. The fear was too strong. Instead, I tried to live with it. Each night I would check the window at 3 a.m. He would appear, face the wall, then turn to face me, step forward, point, and then turn back again. It became a pattern. The pointing made me uneasy. I didn't know what it meant. Was he trying to tell me something? Did he want me to come down? Did he want me to open the window or turn on a light? One evening I decided to leave a note in the alley during the day. I wrote a short message on a piece of paper. Who are you? What do you want? I felt silly, but I had to try. I folded the note and placed it under a small rock in the alley around noon when no one was around. That night at 3 a.m., I looked out. The note was gone. He was there doing the same routine. If he took the note, he gave no sign of it. He never showed any reaction besides pointing. Over time, the stress got to me. I started talking to myself more. I tried to find logical reasons. Maybe he was just a man playing a prank. Maybe he wore some mask without features. Maybe he enjoyed scaring me. Maybe there were other people watching from somewhere else, recording my reactions. But no matter how I tried to explain it, the lack of any normal human behavior made no sense. He never approached the building enough to touch it. He never spoke. He never tried to break in. He never threatened me with a weapon. He never showed any emotion, if he even had a face to show it with. Eventually, I decided I had to leave. I didn't care if it cost money. I started looking for another apartment. I didn't tell anyone the real reason. I just said I needed a change. While I searched, I tried to ignore him at night, but it was impossible. Every time I saw him, I felt that same tension. My chest got tight, my shoulders stiffened, my breathing grew shallow, and I felt sweat forming on my forehead and under my arms. A few days before I planned to move out, I took one last good look at him. The same time, the same place. He turned toward me, stepped forward, pointed, and faced the wall again. I stared at him until my eyes hurt. I listened to the silence, noted every detail of his clothes, memorized the shape of his head and that blank face. I wanted to have it all clear in my mind so I could at least confirm that it was real. After a while, I closed the curtains and lay down on my bed, staring at the ceiling until morning. When I finally moved out, I did not look back. I packed my things and left during the day. I never checked the alley again. I never saw him again. Sometimes late at night, I think about him. I remember his blank face, the way he pointed at me, and standing by the window, heart racing, unsure of what to do. I still don't know who he was or what he wanted. I just know that every night he was there, and he saw me watching. That is enough to keep me awake, even now.